It's been a long week, Dallas. It always feels like a long week when there's no Valorant action to be held here for the SEL, but we've returned once again. We've got a great matchup as we kick off into our LCQ and playoff stages. Rising Stars down for those tier 3 teams. We're hitting off today, though, in the LCQ. It's Cumberland Destiny, not their main team here in the SEL, facing off against Converse Gold. So kind of a battle of the B team to see who gets to move on here through the LCQ.
Right, definitely in the upper echelon when it comes around to tier 2. Both teams worthy of being in the kind of the tier 1 area. So, I mean, obviously, as we're in that LZQ area, as we're in those playoffs, I mean, we got to go ahead and at least give some lenience to go ahead and see what we're dealing with when we're looking at the likes of these two teams. Because big programs, big baller names, and especially considering what they've done over the course of the season, big contributors to possibly being wrenches in everybody's plans once we get things later along.
Yeah, I really do need to double check real fast who they could conceivably be facing for the LCQ. We'll dive into that throughout the game and towards the end, I'm sure. So there's plenty of points to be made. But there has been a change for the map pool. We're not reflecting that just yet, I believe, here in the SEL, as well as having a new duelist to step in. We are reflecting that, and they didn't pick either of the two new maps that stepped into the pool?
I mean, makes sense, but
the only change in Ascent was they changed one wall. Really, these teams wouldn't even like tease the option for that? Well, there's been a new map pool selection. Either of these two teams decided they did not want to see Icebox, which is understandable. And then Ascent, we shockingly don't get to see either, despite missing it so much, Dallas, so dearly for the last 3 months. But at the end of the day, I think the map selection is still what we expect here for the SEL. It's nothing too crazy. It's not out of the ordinary. Right. Lotus and Ascent were banned. Ascent being the first ban is the only thing that's shocking to me. Split and Haven are the map 2 that we'll be heading to. Split, I more so would have expected to kind of be the decider map out of all things here for the SEL, but Fracture being the decider is something we have not really seen here for the SEL. And I would love if either of these teams take a map and we actually do get to see Fracture come up.
Yeah, I think honestly Fracture would be fun to look at, but I mean, considering Split being that primary engager on the side of Cumberland, I'm really not too thrown off by that selection. Considering that in Split, when you see teams that are a lot more orchestrated, when they like to have those kind of nitty gritty gunfights, when they like to have a bit of orchestration behind it as well, this is a map that teams like to go ahead and be a little more kind of aggravated to. I mean, considering that you do look at the likes of possibly Bind, it's a bit more of, as you mentioned, an octagon. There's not too much structure to it. It's press W, get on site, find the plant, and get out. And if it doesn't work, well, you got TP there to go ahead and say, let's move get out a little bit further up the line than anywhere else. But when you look at the likes of Split, I mean, it has a lot more structure to it. Obviously, when you talk about the setups, when you talk about the kind of defaults that are going to be there, not only on the attacking side, but better yet the defense. I think there's a lot more leniency here for teams that do want to have themselves a bit more structure, a bit more of a slower game plan. And when it comes around to the retakes, that's when they really get to see all that kind of chaos start to unravel.
Now, a lot of the times we mentioned Split, it comes down to control of middle, control of that central alleyway. The team that controls alley typically controls the pacing and probably the ending result of the round in front of them. As an attacking team, that gives you the easy option to take the rotate up into male and very quickly to the B site hit, or down through ropes and very quickly usurp control over tower on the A side. There's a lot of sustainability there for an attacking team, but you don't have to really drive with the whole roster. It just takes 1 to 2 players, typically a pseudo duelist alongside something like an initiator gear on those corners, or a controller smoke or 2 to close off through rope and then let the team take mailbox. But it's so hard for defending teams to really categorize how much they want to put there, how many players they want to put there, and what agents to kind of slot in those positions. Because if they notice attacking teams aren't putting a whole lot of pressure there, you can kind of get away with one off towards ropes. They have the fall back down below and get into tower, take the rotate through defender spawn, or off to male where they can fall back behind the crates, or down through stairwell to lead into the actual back alley towards defender spawn that is the top side of heaven towards B. It's just going to be this battle of wits for the first 4 or 5 rounds. It really feels like, Dallas, for each of these the first and second half, to kind of figure out where these teams truly feel most comfortable at, and that after we see that, those
Did Scott just tap out? Unfortunate. Well, I think Scott had something going on with his internet. That's the first I've ever seen it. So obviously, I'm going to make a lot of jokes about this going forward as it stands right now. Going back to the note that he was going ahead and mentioning prior, talking about Split, looking at seeing what's going on there. I mean, Split very much is a map where there's a lot of control and there's a lot of kind of things to go ahead and discuss. But it's a little bit more of a thematic choice depending on the compositions you do see, because you will have a lot of that attention rather go over towards male or towards Vince. on your actual site holder sitting up towards heaven rather than the actual influence towards the center of the map, depending on who you're really working with and whether or not your composition allows for it. So we haven't really seen too much of Cumberland Destiny. We know they're strong hitters when it comes around to their pool, better yet, even in their entire tier. Same exact thing when we look on the side of Converse, but I mean, even then, Converse not selecting this is going to go ahead and give us enough of an idea that they should be playing things more a little standard. Not really too crazy in terms of the emphasis. If they do want to push up that mid, it's going to be more of an actual kind of all-in effort in that regard. But looking at the big scheme of things, and even then more so looking at the actual site contributions, we're going to be seeing a lot more influence on the outside, going for those standard defaults, going for those little splits. And even then, whenever you get around to the nitty gritty of it, actually going ahead and finding that push all through simultaneously. So you do have that coverage from site helping that assistance up in heaven, especially seeing that now Tejo being in play here. I mean, we don't have, well, the new duelist yet, and I don't think that should make too much of a difference, but Tejo also being in a play there gives you so much influence to be able to play on the outsides, be able to play in those default entryways, and also still give you that accessibility to help your teammates up in heaven because you're looking at a mini-map rather than a sight line that isn't given to you prior.
No idea what's happened the last 3 minutes. My cat apparently discovered a new button to press in the household, this one being the router way upstairs. She's apparently mad she can't hang out in the studio. Either way, the case has been told. Oh, agent selection not ready. Did we get any teases? Saw a breach in there somewhere in Dallas, which is super viable for this map. I highlight how big Mail is. There's nothing too crazy with it. Have we kind of digested Fracture? I've missed like 2 minutes, and for you, that could be like 17 conversation points. Like,
yeah, I mean, but we haven't digested. I didn't mention anything about Fracture. I was talking more so about Split, kind of going ahead, following up, because I mean, you did mention the influence of the middle of the map, but I just kind of more so put the emphasis on more so towards that Mail, towards that Vince, and towards these players that are up in the heaven sites at both sides of the map, being the kind of the foundation, that cornerstone of the sides, rather than actually putting the influence towards middle, because we have seen more teams, at least in the upper echelon of those actual, rather than our tier 2, but real tier 2 and tier 1, kind of giving up that space. And I think that's a bit too much of a contribution to have a singular player there when you can have somebody on either one of those sites and then have them just kind of watching the rotation there and giving more of an idea off that.
well, we do finally get to see the agent selection. I lost again there, Dallas. It was completely gone. Again, it's been like a minute, and you've probably gone through 13 conversation points. The ebb and flow of caster economy here is completely thrown out the window.
Well,
Oh, true. We are effectively in game.
Yeah, we got about 35 seconds. All you got to do is look at the feed, read the names up there, and
It's a little empty right now. That's right.
yeah, get a go home paid or stay home paid. There you go.
I wish we could have a discrete location where all of the SEO production could have, like a warehouse in the middle of downtown.
The issue is we're on like different.
We're all in different corners. Production crews in Tennessee. No idea where our observer is. Far away. That's for
we're
sure.
not even in the Southeast.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure our wonderful observer is not down in the Southeast. The only thing in the SEO that is not truly the Southeast. As unfortunate.
We'll tell him he's fired after this.
Okay, yeah, we'll let him know very shortly. Covering this. Mel controls seemingly contested here for Cumberland. They don't want to allow that alley, like I mentioned. The heavy emphasis to not let the brawl go down in that direction. Arctic, though, was a very quick sprint up through a ramp, trying to get control towards tower. This is just a distraction point right now for the Converse side to effectively move these 3 players. One with Spike under control, your Omen off towards the B site and get a free plant here, and then a late transition in for your Sentinel, that being your Cypher, a lot like you'd see on Haven for that slow wraparound. Looks like Converse are trying to employ multifaceted map playstyles here on the map of Split.
Yeah, I mean, just going ahead, looking for something here. I mean, a nice little exchange to start things up. I mean, knowing that Cumberland is going to be down that Tejo, I mean, they're not going to be able to really hold things out nearly as effectively, knowing that they don't have too much denial off those regenerative nades. But, I mean, even then, still on the attacking side, able to go ahead and do enough to kind of postpone that plant, play the defensive side, and you're relying on the rest of your team to kind of get something done here. So getting that first blood when getting onto site will help you in that process. But everywhere else, that's where you got to be looking. You got a guy up in heaven trying to hold you down. You got everybody else back in their typical post plant back in main over on garage, and it's just an absolute bloodbath down this lane trying to get something done, and it's Converse who comes out on top at the end of it.
I mean, you have so many players freely able to put that spike down, the 3 and that quick rotate rotate over to B. Once they gave away a lot of their audio cues and their inkling for contention towards A, you can then set up those players for a post plant. You treat one of them almost like a sacrificial lamb towards back of sight. They're the first to fall when Cumberland eventually tries to usurp control of the objective. But then you've got Eggrols, who comes from that flank from all the way up inside of heaven from tower side, wrapping all the way through. That slow, methodical crawl to catch off the Cumberland defense, and they just didn't really have a way to answer back that player from up in heaven. They'd all already dropped, couldn't put a player towards alley that's easily viewable from Eggrols above. Spike was hard to contest because you still have a little bit of breach utility inside of garage, and a Teo as well that is very easily willing to swing that if they don't have the salvos back on recharge. Converse conclude round 1 very much so in their favor, and now can set the stages for a very successful round 2 as 4 players make their movement off towards the B site. Here inside garage, Eggrols will make that kind of transition away from A main, leaving their spy cam in that direction, maybe hoping to get the peak of intel off to the Raze that's trying to maybe prowl in for contention. But they're going to hit this B site fairly quick here, waiting for maybe this Vice utility to eventually be noticed 100%. Maybe waiting for Doc to layer in a smoke up towards heaven. You see them kind of queuing it up here. The Tejo salvo from Crass just to clear away towards Cubby. But Arctic didn't get as much momentum as they wanted on those boost packs and slightly got stunned in the exact same movement as well. Putting Converse, who were keyed up for a quick sprint to B, now stalled out completely in garage. Though with 40 seconds, it's still their game to make the rotative case to catch 1 or 2 off, and there's the headshot, wanting more. Being rushed upon by Blitzem, though they'll fall. There's enough damage because Kyoto's also stepped into the fray and put Cumberland a man up despite the trade.
Yeah, huge stance there from Cumberland. I mean, going ahead, getting the initial pick, finding one of these players, get a free upgrade into a Bulldog. You're already going to take that every single day of the week, but when you look at everything else happening there, you knew they were stalled. I mean, Converse did not want to be taking that rotate. They didn't put any emphasis towards the middle of the map, so they didn't feel like the rotate was going to be easy enough. So now they feel forced in the last second ditch effort to get onto site, get something to work with here. And even then, looking at John, even surviving, being able to get that Bulldog earlier, pass the thing on, and everybody acquiescing and upgrading the process is nothing but just an outstanding effort here from Cumberland to just come back from the ashes of what was that first round. What wasn't detrimental or terrible by any means, having yourself a 1-1 start and even then able to follow up with it, knowing you completely shut down that economy of Converse in that process. You should find yourself, rather than a 2-0 start or a 1-2, you should be finding yourself possibly the next 3 off the back of it.
I think the Doc smoke went out a little bit too soon. Maybe it was a little discombobulated on timing for Converse Gold overall in the push. I think the smoke went to heaven, and then half a second to a second afterwards, then the salvos went out towards box, and Cumberland's defense was just so ready to shut that down. Player from up above on Raptors, watching, willing, just stepping through the smoke, not wanting to leave the player on site all by their lonesome. It's just a very strong read by them, and past that point, the 2 players flanking here through vending just shut down so much of Converse's potential for rotating the other way. Getting the first blood and not letting it be refragged makes it a numbers game, and the numbers just happen to favor your defense that round. But this one, you're starting off on the right foot. You get the first blood, you knock down an impactful player for Converse Gold on that momentum, the Raze once again, and now they don't really have the ability to swiftly transition into a site safely, but they still don't have a good idea of what the B hold is looking like, and they want to kind of test the waters early in this half to see how A is going to start to function for this defense of Cumberland. And for John, it's a very far back, very withheld position, just kind of stalling out, maybe hoping that Doc or somebody from the side of Converse will peek that Tower Raptors side. Hot Dog could maybe have a chance to swing afterwards, but this is where you've laid in the Vice utility, and you're trying to have that get burned by Teo on the other end as the Stinger may be able to get a kill, and barely does before Eggrols gets a share shot back the other way. John with a Bulldog disaster off to the head of Crass, and Doc wants to drop to the site, but Cumberland are all but willing to take these engagements as John does the exact same thing we saw at the end of last round, but once again it's John coming out victorious, though this time he's the player in elbow.
And even then, I mean, the fortunate reality of getting that pick on the player that has the spike, I mean, you know that that's now held hostage out in the middle of the site. You're having to go ahead and go on a rescue mission there from the side of Converse to go ahead and get that thing back into your hands. Meanwhile, you're just not letting your share of shots. And John is able to just go ahead and kind of hold down that left click and manage to get all the kills necessary to hold on to that site. So it was just a perfect little lineup there that worked into Cumberland's favor. And with this one being their map pick, I mean, obviously they're going to take that every single day of the week. The one thing I'm going to be looking at going forward, though, is going to be that operator play in here by Hot Dog now. Because, I mean, this is a gun that we don't see very often on Split specifically. you know, with the exception of the last time, possibly back in the chamber days, sitting right down towards that middle lane, when there wasn't much utility to really hold on to these outer edges from those heaven areas of the map, and already managing to get the first blood with it. So seeing that there's a second player double down over there and a bit of an actual emphasis towards the middle of the map with that 3-player allocation, you would think that they're going to try to go ahead and push and to make the play through vents, but at this point, it understandably so that you're not going to be touching vents. You're not going to be moving towards that area, especially knowing that not only is the operator there, but Vice is as well, making that seem like a nightmare. So best place you got besides it, more than likely Garage. Let's test it out, you know, see what's going on there, and get our heads popped off in the process.
Wow, what a quick reaction, Piotto. The Astra lays down a Constellation just inside that walkway from Garage. If Converse were trying to maybe find an impact quickly before that stabilized into a smoke or was pulled back by the Astra on the side of Cumberland, that being Gerardo, it doesn't matter. Kyoto gets one more frag on top. It's only egg rolls left, and their success is short-lived past that point. It's Cumberland coming away with another very successful round win. This will be 3 in a row for them, and Converse are going to have to step into round 5, looking at a scoreline that is going to be very tricky, or a credit economy. It's going to be very tricky to try to work around. There's potential for maybe a semi-buy, a thrifty purchase for the side. But for a map like Split, if you let the economy broil into a condensing issue over and over again, it's already difficult enough to come back from a tough half, especially when you're struggling in offense. You got to just, I think, take the hits, buy up some sheriffs, maybe a tricky weapon for your Rays that can close the gap. They were teasing a judge there, but they hold back a little bit with the sheriffs and play for that next round, just getting as much weapons, as many ult orbs as you can. And this is where I would argue the Tejo salvo, the smoke and Garage would have been a solid idea, but they want speed. But they could get kind of gate kept from this Vice ball that was shockingly placed up in heaven, and it works. Gerardo using their Vice utility to great success as an Astra of all things to knock down once again Arctic, who tries a little bit too quickly for Converse to close the gap.
Well, I mean, that was a last-ditch effort for, Gerardo. Being in that hole, being not able to really get out and go anywhere, just saying at this point, if I'm going to possibly die to the pain shell, I might as well just make a push and make an effort and possibly find a kill in the process. And that's exactly what it's done. Also, speaking of, you know, efforts, it's John every single time doing such an outstanding job of holding down this A side, as we've already seen thus far, and making sure that the trend continues and manages, well, to be just that, continue to be a trend. Shutting down players, making sure that you're being a problem once they arrive on site. Didn't even really need utility, just found the shots to line up there, knowing that receiving the comm from heaven, you get to watch that little angle, you get to watch that tiny little terrace, and people are going to be just funneling out for you to just spray things down with. So as we already told, I mean, I mentioned earlier, whether or not you take the point that I said as either taking 3 rounds after the fact of that first, or whether taking 3 rounds in total, it seems like Cumberland has already met both quotas by reaching that 4-1 lead and just really hammering this thing down, putting Converse in a situation where they're trying to figure out where they should start going next. We saw them try that A side earlier, knowing that Vice is probably going to be allocated there. You don't really want to be going back towards that. And we know that even then, as an answer, we see Gerardo going ahead, popping that smoke relatively early towards Garage, making them invest this utility, because where else are they going to go? Well, we're not really quite sure, because John has also made the swap over here. And well, apparently, rather than being a defender of A site, is just more so a hunter of Converse players. Now meeting B once more, able to just mow down 3 simultaneously and maybe able to finish the job here.
Grass now stuck alone, able to send a Salvador. Salvador trying to stun out the player of John, but John took a couple too many steps backwards and is really highlighting themselves as arguably the best player, at least so far, for this Cumberland roster here on Split. 11-2. As an initiator for a map like this is none too shocking, but by the statistical margin that it is in separation for the rest of the team is very impressive, and something that Converse just don't really have an answer for. Their breach has not been able to find as much success in the kill department and hasn't really had the potential to shine just yet on the offense for kind of giving and creating opportunities onto either of these 2 sites. And that's not inherently the breach's fault. It's also coming down to the failure for separation and clearance of space. For Arctic, your Rays trying to engage into site. Every time we've seen the double boost pack in, the pain shell to create a gap and trying to fall into that gap moments after it expunges, it's always led to the death of Arctic. And here they're a sacrificial lamb for an op shot all the way back here in through security, as Hot Dog does miss the chance, but it was once again Converse just having to face cheek the opportunity.
There's no lines here,
as they
buddy.
get hit here by the Armageddon direct on site. Egg Rolls is dead. Arctic dealt with by the Vandal, not even needing to be damaged by the Armageddon, and it's just 3 remaining for Converse Gold, as Doc will put the spike down. forcing time into the problem of Cumberland's roster, but the guns are just too clean until Blitz shocks the world, hitting 2 one-taps, leaving Doc now alone on the refrag, using their from the shadows to tease that they step away.
I knew it!
Gerardo, the ult is used by them, and they may have a chance, but they ran out of ammo! And Kyoto keeps Cumberland in this round and can easily defuse this fight, putting them up now to a 5-round lead, putting 6 in a row on Converse Gold.
I saw a Twitter clip 2 weeks ago of somebody in a ranked game pulling off the From the Shadows fake, going ahead, catching somebody up and thinking, oh, I have to see this. I have to see it. Successfully managed to win a round. And I think with any other gun, that's a possibility with the Sheriff in hand. So close, but no cigar there specifically for Doc. I mean, such a good effort. I mean, where really are you going to go? And even then, going ahead, finding that From the Shadows. That's a nice cause and divide. Cutting off Heaven. That's where Doc is probably going to go, is back towards main or up towards Heaven to get that coverage. And you find that cutoff saying, I just go ahead and cut it early. Find the kill off the back of that from the setup, and then, well, it just comes down to the 1v1. And even then, possibly could have maybe picked up a gun in that process.
They smoked the rifle. They wanted Gerudo's weapon, but it fell far. It's one of those moments
whenever
where
you get the headshot, you're just knocking that thing out of their hands. They ragdoll.
It flies. That is so unlucky for your last player to try to clutch in that state and have the weapon go so far. And what a big round for Blitz as well. Let's mention here for the side of Converse, they had not been getting very many kills prior. Opening up the 2 up inside tower created so many more opportunities for Converse to hold on to. Yeah, the refrag, but now you know where the final 2 players were initially coming from. They'd be security, they'd be up in tower. So you need to fall back around pillar through elbow to bait that from the shadows. Much cleaner overall for Converse, and that's going to be a tempo setter for them, saying we can get things close, and that was a thrifty round for us.
Yeah, I mean, just good lookings overall. I mean, there for the likes of Cumberland once again. I mean, Converse, obviously, they are giving it their best foot forward. I mean, even then, a lot of these rounds are looking pretty darn promising. They have an idea of really what's happening here with Cumberland, but it just feels like on too many times, on too many occasions, we're just seeing things just work out for Cumberland in terms of the frags. I mean, just looking at John specifically, able to find so many 2 and 3Ks consistently inside this game thus far. I mean, already sitting at 12 kills when it's a 6-1. I mean, this guy has to be the heat of that. I mean, has to be the one really roping all that in. And, well, Case here, obviously, giving some nice help in the process, but with at least that showstopper, it's not enough for the moment. So, with the showstopper also being on the side of Converse, the Annihilation or the Armageddon, every single Ultimate has an A now. But, I mean, seeing even in the Neural Theft, you're looking at possibilities. You're looking at windows that not only can be created, but even the possibility of just breaking right through them. But with that Neural Theft now being out of touch, going ahead and roaming over towards that A site, I think this should be one of those rounds where Converse has read that maybe going for that default split is not going to give you as much of a flank play that you were expecting.
Oh, and all 3 remaining players for Converse just got lined up by a single piece of utility by Cumberland's John. And how many times have I said that John seemingly is everywhere? They're out fragging on the opposing side of Converse. Their breach utility has been nearly perfect. And you can see the replay. This was a great walk up here for Case and Jace, just to kind of get into the control of vending, catch Doc off guard. Nothing Doc can do. That gives the information. Doc's staring up. Their Omen is staring up towards top of Heaven. We need to send utility this way. That gets relayed perfectly to John, and Gerudo, the moment that they know that that stun has been sent, engages afterwards. Cumberland are playing so cohesive, so together, that Converse haven't found an answer for that directive nature that they're bringing to the table. In case we'll try to engage further the ollie off here towards Sewer, assuming this is an eco round coming out for Converse, which is par for the course for them, having to go 1-1 consistently with the losses they've been kind of taking back to back. They don't get the impact they wanted with the first frag, but maybe a chance for a rotate frag here from Eggroll, who's still lagging on that lower rope side inside Sewer. Maybe could flank all the way through. There's no sentinel utility to stop them. There's your counter. They're trying to get all the way in, and this is where you're going to see Blitz fall here from the double swing, and Eggroll's is a little bit too slow on that exit out from Sewers to work with. And the second swing keeps Case out of the line of sight, but not long enough to keep them staying alive, and they'll just have a momentary lapse to fall back, but the team is just being destroyed here. Dallas on B. Can't get any saving grace from Gerudo, and Kyoto also moves forward and dominates the final 2 on Converse's roster.
Yeah, they're just in their head right now. I mean, there's just nowhere it feels like Converse can really go where they feel relatively safe. I mean, even then you can see it. They're caught out looking back towards their own spawn, thinking somebody's back there. It's just Converse can't really feel like they escaped these Cumberland players here for a minute and that they're just kind of held hostage inside this map because the only round they've won was the first one, and that's pistol. That's where everything's a guaranteed equilibrium. And beyond that, it's just chalked up to whatever you make of it. And they really haven't made much out of this just yet. I mean, while they have all the tools and resources to kind of do it right here, right now, I think so long as you find a smoke back towards screen to initially start things off and make that push towards heavy, you can find something. But instead, we're going with the Armageddon, pushing back through heaven, forcing these players up, but they just don't get the engagements that they want to find those picks.
Kyoto and Case, this wombo combo of success that has been here for Cumberland. Again, holding off. This time, top of ramp on A. They've not been able to close that gap because look at the way that Converse has been kind of diluting the sort of effective use of utility from Cumberland by actually using their utility to counteract it, which is about as much as you can ask for at this state of the game for Converse. But it's a frag for frag, 2 for 2. Finally, something has been given in the go-ahead for a team to climb above. Gerardo, who was trying to hold up to the top of tower and lock onto it, gets taken down from inside of A ramp, and Egg rolls. Well, it's not just in this round, thankfully. Doc gets 3 for the trouble, and Converse will net their first round win since round 1, where they then let 8 in a row fall to Cumberland's favor to make this an 8-2 with 2 rounds left in the half.
Yeah, with a 3K off the back of an operator for a round like that. Weird how we're seeing that operator be somewhat of a not a necessity per se, but definitely a very important asset, at least in winning that round in the last process, considering that, I mean, they haven't really found too many solutions to play with. And even then, an operator doesn't ever really feel like much of an actual solution on the attacking side, but it's worth a shot considering that we did see the money invested for it. So going forward, is it going to have much of an influence? I mean, even then, it could on that post plant once you get that spike down and you're on defense, but you're going to be able to push things out. You're going to find the initial engage. You're going to find that space. And it seems like through the middle of the map, they could be pretty darn good to get it.
Egg rolls wants to be out front first, maybe having a chance to get spotted out by Case. Case, though, not having a problem afterwards as Gerardo gets 2 more. And Cumberland's speed, their swiftness on their approach back into the B site to not only stop the total plant whatsoever, not have to worry about a retake, but the ability to do so in a way that makes it so that they're direct in these confrontations with guns, catching them off on their still in transition into site to try to help with the roster that are there. Egg rolls' #1 condition here is to get to site and try to take a player down that's holding off towards box because the salvos haven't been working. In the drop, they get stunned. Gerardo's easily able to line up 2 as the second player extends from garage, and then it's just easy pickings from there for the rest of Cumberland. They are so fast and decisive when a single audio cue is given. They are the fastest team I've seen here for the SCL to act upon that information, and this is probably greatly assisted by the amazing team they have up in tier 1 as assisting them. Even teams higher than that elsewhere, right? They have so much within their program. You can see that kind of rubbing off and that experience greatly helping out on a difficult map like Split, where if you have even momentary lapses of judgment or hesitation, it can very much so cost you the map as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, just really just looking for anything here. I mean, that last round not really going in their direction, seeing what they're working with. There's just not much here for Converse, but I mean, Cumberland obviously just showing an absolute masterclass of why they wanted to select this map. I mean, already looking at the possibility of a 10-2 half. I mean, we're going to be chalking this one up pretty darn quickly at the end of the day is what it seems like. But with the 3 ultimates in hand, you can't blame them. They kind of have to pop in this round. It's a use it or lose it kind of scenario. And with Steel Garden specifically, you're waiting for that spike to go down so you can put them in a situation where they can barely fight back. And that's going to be the best thing you can do, honestly. But with Gerardo, once again, the timing master, I would say, of this map so far. Able to go ahead and close out 3. You don't need any of it, quite frankly. Just go ahead, press W and left click afterward. Easy cleanup here to make it a 10-2 half and give Cumberland what seems like could be just a very, very quick finish to this in that second half if they keep this up.
Yeah, keep in mind, Split is a map, we've mentioned it a lot, is typically dominated from one side over the other, and that can change depending on the scene, if it's high school, collegiate, tier 2, tier 1. But for collegiate, it does seemingly feel like defending teams that are quick to act will always manage to come ahead on that defensive side. So Converse may have a chance to try to make that comeback. It turns into this mental battle instead of just a physical battle in front of them. Can they recover from the, well, trouncing that was this first half of allowing 8 in a row and then still giving up 2 more after the factor? Will they just say this has to play into the next map and we have to kind of play for it? Because this is Cumberland's map pick. Keep that in mind. Haven is where Converse are really looking forward to, but in terms of familiarity with our final decider map of Fracture, I would argue Split is super similar, where the team on defense that can act the fastest off of information is going to one that is ultimately rewarded. And if there's not a big difference, or if there's too big of a difference, I should say, between the way that Cumberland reacted in the first half to how Converse have to react here in the second, well, you really would not want to let Cumberland be the team to start off on defense for a third map of Fracture. Time will tell. Cumberland are trying to play a somewhat slower game, using all their salvos throughout the whole entirety of the round, maybe hoping that this Vice here of Hot Dog could sneak a kill in or two. Arctic has a chance, though, with a classic and is able to deal with Hot Dog and Egg Rolls. Tally's in for 2 on top. Kyoto and Case, who have been that wombo combo for Cumberland on their transitions to sites, have been so easily dealt with by a single Cypher on the A site, leaving just your Astra in Breach. And while they are super clean together, this is another one of those duos who seem to work fabulously. Gerardo and John for Cumberland. It's not going to be enough if it's a 5-on-1 when Gerardo gets isolated down towards Rope, and it'll be Blitz, well, maybe having a chance to use their Breach utility, the last little remnants that will be here, to kind of snuff out where John may be lying in wait, as they'll prowl in through Central Alley. And I would hope that their idea would be close to B. The whole team has the majority been lost off towards A, but Converse know this. Look how 5 are ready to hold on to this. John really should get a free kill here. If they don't, it would be an easy refrag from Blitz, but Krask goes unnoticed as John does not check that corner behind box, and Converse will strike for that pistol round a lot like they did in the first half.
And essentially almost the only thing they got in that first half. So, I mean, it's good to know that they're at least consistent in something, and that's going to be pistol rounds. It's going to help out during that second map if it's just more so a strength than anything else. But, I mean, we get to see these rifles. We get to see things held on to, because this is where things started crumbling during that last half, when we saw that Converse just could not hold on to these weapons, gave Cumberland at least that first free pick, got the Bulldog off the back of it, and then was able to take that somewhere else and managed to get that hold down from that rotation that came through. So maybe if Cumberland's a little bit quicker to the cut on the rotations, that could alleviate that problem, or they could just give up nothing for free off rip, and I don't think they're planning on doing that. So with Kyoto getting a quick first blood there, that's another weapon. Acquiesce once more. That's going to be an upgrade for somebody. That's a Guardian. Somebody else can now take that Outlaw or the Bucky and say, hey, this is another thing. Not a pistol. It's something. And it's going to give us probably enough leeway to get on the site here if we do want to go for this middle up on top nail.
Beautiful paranoia to set up Arctic swing as they now get a third for themselves in the round, hoping for more. What a nasty shot to the head of Gerardo. Just one remaining Hot Dog, getting their second for this round. But the judge may not be enough to secure victory. They'll have to get an ace to secure a clutch for Cumberland and get up to 11, as Converse just need to stabilize their positions, not overextend towards A. The Sentinel can play in for a retake. If they give up a kill on this approach here to B site, if your Cumberland player of Hot Dog's able to find it, the second one just needs to fall back and wait for Egg Rolls to come in the later stages. But Blitz holds strong up inside of Heaven, deals with the Vice approaching from Garage, strikes 2 for a 4th round win now for Converse, and they will not make the mistake they had in that first half of having it go the other direction. It's not a 1-1, or really a 1-8 as it turned into. It will be a 2-0 start so far for Converse, as they hope to, and I would hope they'd kind of engage heavy for this, Dallas. They hope to try to get 3 in a row to stabilize themselves even further and throw the eco for Cumberland out the window, which should help them greatly to reach a 4th and maybe even 5th after the fact, because Arctic will be very close, if not already having the showstopper out if they just get a single ult orb. I didn't see it for just a moment. Yet 2 ult pips. It's been increased by 1. They'll have the showstopper, and that would be wonderful to get a free strike for a player here on this approach for Cumberland.
I mean, just looking for something here, honestly. I mean, an early pick here from Cumberland, full rifle round. I mean, this is the point where they can really start turning things on ahead, but I mean, they're going to be taking it over to A. So that player, I mean, that kill, Arctic, not really going to find anything off the back of this, because nobody's going to end up pushing that. You're looking in these earlier stages of the map, or at least of this half, where you're starting to investigate. You're trying to figure out where exactly is everybody going to be. Are we trying to take attendance? We're trying to figure out where these players like to station themselves, how they like to allocate things, whether or not it's a 3-2 split, 2-1-2, whatever it may be. And they have figured out a pretty darn good bit. And even then, better yet, the process, knowing that, A, more importantly, seems like a pretty easy push that they wanted to go for it, as they've already found so much effort out of it to keep the majority of their players alive in the process of capturing and planting, and even then more so securing the round off the back of it. So good looks for them. Even then, find themselves the upgrades. You do see the Hot Dog will possibly be able to manage the rifle in that process, or at least get somebody else to buy out of Kyoto. Seeing the looks of everyone, it seems like they're in high hopes of winning this next one as well. so long as they can make sure to find, any kind of curveball to throw into the mix. Because obviously Arctic has one in the back pocket with that showstopper, but that's going to be more so probably for a retake if we do see Converse once again not really give too much emphasis over towards that A site, which it seems like they've definitely done now, doing kind of that double down to the Cypher utility and having a player sitting towards back heaven waiting for that trip. But it could be too little too late if they've already found that control.
Great counter to use the breach util to keep them away from Central Alley. They use the salvos to clear top rope. Don't really have to worry about that if you just use breach utility from all the way inside tower. The walls connect, why not? Who cares? And it'll keep Cumberland back, and they arguably lost down the utility battle up until the showstopper got brought forward by Arctic, who unfortunately finds no impact off of it besides maybe warding away this Cumberland offense. Blitz from up above sees a confrontation with Hot Dog, and though they both fired around the same time, this is no Star Wars battle. Han did not need to fire first if Hot Dog just aims a little bit better, and they'll get the first blood. Starting off this round, hoping for a 12th to get them at match point for map 1, and Cumberland try to hold on to the strength they've been given until I guess they want to keep their vice closer to A side to keep the pressure up there. Didn't pan out for them. Evening out now to a 4-on-4 as it's a sprint for this Cumberland offense to B site. Case has already claimed all of the objective, knows no one's up at heaven as the Astral Smokes will try to stall out. The salvos will buy a little bit of extra time. They still do plenty of damage, though not enough to destroy a lockdown at a KJ's, but it's still something you don't want to test lying within, as John will get the spike down and now stall out towards back defender spawn. This back alley is so difficult to contest if you don't have somebody towards garage, or even worse, somebody in upper heaven, as it's a near miss for Egg Rolls and Gerardo from Cumberland. They just barely missed the opportunity to see each other, but they'll send Gerardo on their own mission. They use an activation code to send him off here to the top of heaven to get a free kill, and that's Doc now circumnavigated, one up on Rafters that's dealing with the chamber. Egg Rolls annihilating Kyoto, and Cumberland is really only one player left, and the time is just not on their side because it's an easy crossfire and a last second salvo from Krast to get this defuse, which, though close, should be no problem here for Converse to get the 5th.
Yeah, I mean, good for them there. I mean, and we saw that Cumberland didn't really get too much of actual communication with these players that were returning onto side. I mean, even then, back towards heaven specifically, I was seeing Gerardo get that lap around, and even then, it kind of more so concerned me whether or not we were seeing these players kind of register what was going on there. But with so much of a pinch coming through, and then everybody on the side of Cumberland just finding all these different respective positions to be coming back from, it was a good recovery and better yet, better shots, knowing how fast they really executed that. So it's good to know that they do find some comfort in the chaos. They can find something, they can find some results better yet through it, but they got a long road ahead of them to really put themselves back in this thing. And I would say they need it to possibly even hit just 9 for me to kind of feel like there's any shred of hope for them. Because right now there's a light up in the distance, but it's not very bright. So you're not really quite sure what that may be. So I think honestly, you find yourself a first pick, you get the neural theft off the back of it, you go ahead, figure out where everyone is, and then just get that spike down and hold it beyond that point. But the last thing you need to be doing here for Converse, I mean, and I think a big key to success going forward, is just playing things slow. Don't give up these first bloods. We're not going to see an operator be brought out by, Cumberland on this defensive side. That's not going to really do too much here. But I think, honestly, so long as they can just wait for somebody to extend, because Cumberland's been relatively antsy here, I think that could be doable.
Sabo, one towards mail, the other one off towards top of rope and vent. Arctic will send the Roomba down into alley and try to close out any contention here towards mid. And while they're burning a lot of utility to do so, it's enough to damage Kyoto. The drone comes around the corner. One more shot for the shorty, not going to matter. Both missing, and Arctic gets a free kill for the 49 HP player that is the Tejo. Cumberland are now missing a big part of their initiation prowess, but they will just walk in to this A site for free. And John has the chance to get this spike down. Case and Gerardo, though, from upper and tower will fall here from easy collecting kills for Converse. John will be ready up a flash to maybe try to stall things out as long as possible. Hot Dog has a Guardian behind them. Not really worried too much about cutting off sight lines for an easy crossfire, as Cumberland's final remaining 2 players are trapped here in the back of sight, and it is Converse just slowly suffocating their positions like a python constricting upon its prey. Converse will get to 6th and will very much so do a good job of closing the total scoreline disparity that it was very prevalent at the end of the first half, as you'd expect for a map that is really dominated by defending teams acting quickly.
Well, I mean, even then, better yet, doing it in a flawless fashion. I mean,
Yeah.
considering that they were already looking at a bad eco situation. I mean, already able to go ahead and manage the weapons, but some of the players were on half armor and they were kind of all over the place, a little more sporadic. But now that they're in a bit more unison, they do have somewhat of an actual insurance behind them. If one of these rounds was won by Cumberland, they're sitting a map point. But even then, if it comes at the wrong time, especially at the back of that last round, whether win or lose, Converse wasn't going to have much to manage off the back of that. They were still going to be in somewhat of a thrifty situation to get back in and continue that spree once more. So that was kind of one of the most critical rounds, if not the most critical round of the entire thing to win, and they did it at the best possible way.
Ace actually loses out on the first fight in this. Now Nets Cumberland once again that first player pick and losing out on a very important overall agent for Cumberland makes it so they once again have to kind of walk into sight and hope that the rest of the pieces kind of funnel in together. Egg rolls hiding within their own Cypher cage, closing around elbow, isolating Hot Dog, and now layering a second cage as they want to engage. Stunned here though, and a pre-fire hopefully giving a bit of safety as they were very scared and concerned about the danger. John uses an ult, but Egg Rolls uses the audio cue in the position for its start to easily counteract it. This is the third for Egg Rolls, and Arctic takes down the last flanker of Gerardo. 7 now for Converse. The first half may not have mattered whatsoever as long as Converse continue to bring this success story forward, and it's kind of something you'd expect from what is apparently their map pick. Is the bottom left is slightly incorrect, and by slightly incorrect, completely incorrect. It's flipped. Split is actually Converse's pick, and Haven is Cumberland's.
Yeah, I mean, just looking for something here. I mean, honestly, looking at Converse scene, I mean, we have more specifically seen Egg Roll start to step up on this defensive side, be the cipher that the team needs to be kind of getting things done. But better yet, Arctic also stepping up now because, I mean, on the attacking side, we just saw near to nothing out of that player because, well, out of your duelist, you're hoping that on the attacking side, they feel much more at home. They start to really feel that momentum build up, but we just didn't really get much during that first half. But now that we're seeing Converse actually go ahead, be able to let things slow down, you know, kind of find somewhat of a tempo here to play with, and even then let Cumberland just kind of come into their direction, it's a lot different. They're seeing that, I mean, they're not even having to really use too much utility, realistically. I mean, obviously you see the sleuth, but it's not to the same degree where you're making all those investments. I mean, with Tejo and having those salvos available just for free every, you know, less than a minute, and seeing the breach and seeing those shocks, I mean, just knowing that they are finding these avenues, these lineups that work out for them. And as I said earlier, off the back of that initial A hit, Cumberland is finding these plants consistently here, but for some reason, they haven't found the hole, haven't gotten comfortable enough. They don't really know how to hunker down on this one yet, just against Converse. And I can't blame them, knowing they have enough of an actual point spacing here to say, let's keep hitting that till we figure it out. Because if we don't, there's no shot even in an OT that we get our chance of a win.
Next round up in the books, and look at the danger Converse wants to bring. They're engaging fast, and Arctic gets 2, make it 3. No, Crab stealing the limelight, forcing a near ace, but a 4K potential until Gerardo, desperation perspiring off the foreheads of Cumberland's offense. That was about as quick. You see the entire replay here for this round. We have in the short replay that we have, you could see that the round hadn't even started yet. That's how fast Converse took the gamble of engaging here towards A main, providing the pressure and getting the biggest payout possible for it. Their 8th round win, netting them just 3 rounds between the two sides, and Cumberland being shoved back into an eco round, which should pretty easily mean a 9th for Converse, bar a miracle or just a really good substantial clutch kills out of Cumberland Sheriffs, and maybe a Marshall if they decided to bring something like that, or Stingers, maybe something along those lines to get up close into the face of this Converse defense, but that's not been allowed to this point as Arctic will take a tick of damage on the approach, now hoping for more. The salvos to keep Arctic here, and though they do get taken down and a rifle maybe potentially there, you get 2 kills and you have somebody covering that top angle in mail, meaning that rifle should not be something reproachable here by the attacking teams trying to move forward for Cumberland.
Oh, that double down. Even after the back of one stun, you're thinking now's the time I can swing. Maybe I can cover something, but that fault line comes through. Not really something you can fight back with, and the stuns feels inevitable past that point. But one thing that you could have used, especially, is going to be that Steel Garden, kind of creating that equal stance. But I think they're going to be saving that for the next round, waiting to see if anything can be managed out of this. Maybe go ahead and pick up a weapon in the process, at least make things expensive. I mean, because I like that attempt. You know, the Outlaws up there, you know, another player may be there. And while the distraction back towards main is going to be one player, you're going to have another one push up. But even then, that attempt wasn't successful. And we do see Converse once again pulling out another round. So what I talked about, the kind of glimpses of hope and the shreds of light that's there, I mean, they've done it. They haven't given up a single round in the process as well. So, I mean, this is the chance now where they can actually manage to get this comeback. But Cumberland have to create that stop. They have to put that hold down on the field. And I think, quite frankly, they can. They just got to get to a situation where they're not losing players. If anything, give up the site, play the steel guard, and then just invest everything just so you can guarantee that number 12.
Doc will lay a smoke down quickly here towards A main. Talk about wanting to guarantee the 12th. You may have to get a little desperate forward here as it looks to be a really primed A strike. They're coiling up like a snake, waiting for the utility to be sent, and then they'll strike true, hoping the venom that is Case's showstopper here will find impact, but unfortunately, they teeth off in the wrong direction and leads to no success. Maybe utility being cleared, but I don't think there's anything layered there for this Converse defense. They do have the garden. There it goes. Will come down, and this will stall out very heavily the Converse defense, and majority of their players were impacted by this, so they'll have to get some assistance for egg rolls to have both sheriffs covering this crossfire. As a showstopper sent back now the other way, and Blitz wants to try to create some space towards elbow, but Case is unfazed by that flash and gets 2, no 3 for their trouble. Showstopper out, may not matter. It's a 1v2, and these players are primed here towards the inside of a ramp, having no problem to kind of wait things out and stall. Kraz can tap this spike, but you have a salvo, you have an Armageddon worst case scenario if you really wanted to bring it out to get that 12th and guarantee, and you just don't even have to stress it because Kraz has to engage you, and you know it, and you'll wait for your doppelganger to fall to the Vandal in your arms. 12 now for Cumberland. Match point here on Split, and Converse, they worked so hard, Dallas, to get this far. They cannot let the 12th round that hitches be the thing that destroys their mental. Stay locked in. Overtime is still capable of being on the horizon.
Oh, most definitely is. I mean, seeing how this attacking side has been for Converse, and even then, I mean, seeing how it is better yet the defense for Cumberland. I mean, I think honestly on the flip side, I mean, Cumberland, they have not really found too much, but they have shreds of light, which gives them, I want to say, a bit of an upper hand when it comes to that, you know, second part. When they're trying to manage things because they should going into that second half of the leg up, but as it stands right now, I mean, I'm just not sure we're going to get there because too many just utility kills are coming through. Paint shell on both sides. Everything's everywhere, but the spike isn't even down. And that's something that we're going to be seeing as it's moving over towards B and going on the ground. Is at that point where the Armageddon will be available, but it has enough time. It has that space, but it has players pushing to the other side of it, and you have to know it's there. Already a nice little kill to start off with Blitz, but everybody else on Cumberland is completely ready for it as they clean up house and find themselves that first map.
Wow, what a dicey ending scenario for that round. Looked like we saw maybe another one being able to fall for Converse as they decisively took down the first two, but they weren't given the chance to fall back. Utility for utility for raise on raise. The paint shells are seemingly powerful if there's a stun alongside it, and that was clearly available for both teams in that position. So I think Case's death was more like an accident there for Cumberland as they tried to peek over the box where the paint shell landed. It doesn't matter. They win the round. We won't harp on it too much. The Armageddon was avoided, but it did force those players directly down into sight, which means your op player that I think was something that you were trying to bring out as a kind of shock factor on your defense for Converse wasn't able to hold the high ground, had to be hyper aggressive. It was not really able to tandem swing to clear out that back corner inside B, which freed up the refrag for the crossfire and kept your player on pillar completely safe. And then your garage player afterwards completely safe for the final kill. Very wonderfully read by Cumberland for a post plant. It's very few and far between we've seen them get in that half because it was difficult for them in the first place, set up for a post plant, because by the time they get into site and get the spike down, it always felt like on both sides of the house, Dallas, that the defense was already barreling down your neck and they couldn't stabilize. Fast on the reproach away from sight and a much better execution overall for them, despite the oddity of those first two kills for both sides inside garage.
Yeah, I mean, just so much going on there realistically at the end of it all. I mean, even then, Converse making the comeback that they did, I mean, that was just surprising enough in its own right. Seeing that first half for Cumberland, seeing what that defense looked like, it was so darn good. But even then more so, I mean, just seeing how the retaliation, seeing even better yet, and not letting that affect them too much, because there was a rocky start to that second half, but seeing the pistol round consistency is something that I'm going to be taking note of going forward, because when we go around to these next couple maps, if we even get there, because keep in mind, this could close out on Haven, there is something here for Converse. It's not just a not attempt. They have some sparkles of, you know, light here and there, and they got some good thoughts in those heads of theirs, and they got some good shots on the monitor. But I think genuinely as a team, I need to see a little bit more cohesion in terms of their approaches. I need to see them stop giving up so many first deaths when it comes around to that first part, or better yet, just in general, because that's ideal. And then even then more so, these post plants on Cumberland, that's the big thing I'm going to be looking at going forward, because Haven, while it's a map that feels a little easier to do because you're not watching nearly as many angles vertically, I still want to see what their composition is going to look like to account for that.
Now, we do have confirmation because UKO, I believe, unfortunately had to forfeit their game in the LCQ against Oklahoma, that the winner of this series will face Oklahoma. And if you are Cumberland, or if you are Converse, sorry, where your duelist is struggling to get those first bloods and to stay alive on your attacking sides for getting into space, creating the opportunities for the team, and there's just nothing really to gamble or to balance these scales of fate really for the team in pursuit of sight, you're going to get punished by Oklahoma. They're a team that feels like throughout multiple seasons now for the ESCL, even if it's not the same players, they've always felt like they're always able to create that really strong duelist. They're always able to have that best player forward, and they're always seemingly finding impact. It's like having college football, and you're like, well, George is going to have a running back, right? Like, that's what it looks like. They're always going to have a duelist, and they're going to outfrag you. And if that happens, it's going to turn into a trickle effect momentum, where obviously it worked in the first half there for Cumberland. They got a trickle effect. The duelist didn't find really any success, and Arctic didn't show up to the second half, and they were so darn good in that second half. But if they would just a little bit more in the first half, 2 rounds difference, 3 rounds difference, it would have been overtime or not even needing it in the first place. They'll have to look back on this. We're going to take a very short break. We've been kind of yapping a lot here in between the maps, trying to give the players time to talk things through, but we're going to still take that break. We'll see you guys when map 2 is ready to go underway. A 13-9 score, Dallas, on Split is nothing to scoff at, especially when you keep in mind that that was a 10-2 split at halftime to kick off that second half. It was a ridiculously solid attempt for a comeback from Converse on their map pick, that being Split. But now when we jump on over to Haven, you'd maybe assume that both teams will be equally familiarized with this map. But if you're picking this, you'd assume you have a lot of confidence for it. So Cumberland has the advantage, taking their opponent's map pick. Maybe we see the old return to the collegiate special of winning your opposition's map pick. Time will tell, but I sure would love to see a Fracture come here for the SEL.
I would too, but I would also like to see teams just kind of play at their best and even then get a 13-11 conclusion when no matter what the side really may be. I mean, because I'd like to see more so, considering we're in this LCQ situation, moving into playoffs and just kind of seeing everything unravel. I want to see some consistency. I want to see these teams really iron things out. I want to see just the best level of gameplay possible. When we're seeing first bloods kind of being given up, players doubling, tripling down into sight lines they've previously just been kind of completely shut down on. It's just small things like that where you have to swallow your pride and understand for the greater good, you need to be somewhere else. You need to have a different objective, and you just need to be playing for the win by any means necessary.
Now, keep in mind, this is the 5th seed Cumberland Destiny now facing off against the 12th seed Converse Valorant Gold. And we've talked a lot about how good Converse are, and their ranking and score lines weren't super indicative of where we thought they'd be overall as a player and as a team. Maybe a tough split overall for them, maybe a tough pool that they were within. No matter the case, they are definitely showing that they can compete against this Cumberland Destiny roster on a fairly equal level when they are able to kick things into high gear in that second half. So Haven, I would assume, would be a fairly close match, but it's going to come down to how these agents pan out and where the success stories come on an individual level. Looks we'll see Converse bringing out the Yoru and the ISO pick for a map like this. Now, ISO did get a slight buff, I would argue it is. I think some people are like, well, it's kind of a bad change, but I think it's an overall slight buff. So maybe this will really help out their offensive approach overall. For a map like Haven, this is where you do typically see things like ISOs coming out, really being strong against operators in the opposing end, giving you that free one-shot back in return, and meaning that congestion is a little bit more solid overall for you to make the fallback plan if you do get a quick sprint from an offense pushing towards your side. But having the Tejo of Kyoto once again for Cumberland, John on that breach, these are players that didn't have to step off of these roles and positions from their previous map. And when we talk about two exceptionally powerful players, it was going to be John, and it was going to be that combo of having John alongside Gerardo or Kyoto alongside Case, who Kyoto sticks to the Tejo. Case can now go over to the Jet, and Gerardo, while a little less potent in comparison to an Astra, still exceptionally powerful, being able to bring out that Omen, who has the assistance that's super strong with the Paranoia for the short sight, as well as the baiting out with a From the Shadows, or even worse, a Shrouded Step to try to contest early into the face of the competition.
Which even then more so, I mean, big thing I'm looking at is going to be the ISO Yoru matchup when it comes around to the being on the attacking side. Because as it stands right now on defense, you're going to see some emphasis. You're going to see a little bit of aggression. You can already see Arctic just being placed up, having that TP early, saying that I can go ahead and back off of that now, and not even really opting for that afterwards, knowing that you do have ISO there. You got Sova towards A, and you're saying at this point, I can commit to a lap around if I really want to feel like it, but doesn't end up doing that. Instead, understands that the initial contact will be taking place over at A, and you're looking to see, especially at the back of those three players, boom, throw out the flash off the back of it, make a quick swing, and not only find one, but two, and a third there to make it a very quick round to not only start, but better yet to finish.
I mean, this, it's a pistol round, so it's like it doesn't matter if all players die, but you're stripping credits that could be in Cumberland's hands for the kills, and you're also making sure they don't get plant down, which is even further credits that would have been really nice to pad their pockets for a second round, or even to help them when the third round comes around. That isn't available for them. And Arctic charges up the Dimensional Drift, which is such a super solid ultimate on any map, but especially when they're not your primary duelist in the face and they can kind of just assist tertiary wise with a flash in the back pocket. Arctic looks to be a very ever-present danger as they heated up towards the end of the second half on Splits, and we're hoping that that continues here into our second map of Haven, as Blitz is the forefront runner here. A double tap app eating a bullet from Case, taking the down afterwards of the Bulldog, recharging that barrier and keeping this pressure here as the team is kind of stuck in this onslaught position just outside of Haven, where Arctic now steps into the fight, getting their own lap of luxury that is a frag, as you have a chance for one more because Crash just got taken down by a classic on side of Hot Dog, and you know you can just bait out some utility and should have the advantage, but a Classic is so darn dangerous with the right click. They want to take that fight at a much larger distance than the Classic would like to, but Classic on Classic could be a threat if Hot Dog wants to push even further forward, as the team of Cumberland have managed to engage the C side and get that spike down until Gerardo, maybe with a flank, can isolate their own kill, and it's a 2-on-2. Kyoto with a Sheriff, the team now fully stacked on C, and Egg Rolls and Arctic have to make a decision about how they'll try to retake this objective. One towards Garage, or even two through Garage window. The salvos were making noise towards C. They'll bait at a drop there towards window, maybe hoping there'll be a fight here. Kyoto will go on phase though for more, as the little HP of Egg Rolls doesn't require a headshot, giving Cumberland round 2.
Yeah, I mean, just pig stands there from Cumberland, just going ahead, rolling it back, and even then, it didn't come down to even just that last fight alone. Seeing how these players were stationed, yeah, went over towards A, trying to bide time, give that time just to clock, and just put in and cash out on that C side to put players on the opposite side. And even then, we saw Converse be a little bit shaky, double allocating to that player there, making sure they could secure that kill, rather than losing something unnecessary. And I like the safe idea behind it, and it cost you your life though, or better yet, just more so time. And that's what you could have had more of when you saw that, even then more so through the middle of the map, Dorado just kind of going ahead playing that thing out. But I mean, all over the place, these two teams are looking like they understand and respect each other, just like we saw in the middle of map 1. But can't see a string of rounds. That's the big thing. It's nice to see that Cumberland has flipped things around, understandably so. After that last map, getting shut down during that second round, they're now the ones shutting down.
With the first blood effectively in the books for Cumberland, where do you try to push into? You know there'll be likely one less player to contend with on the A site, so it's fairly pleasant to still try to prowl around through long, maybe keep one player with a sideline to lower sewer. Just try to stall as much as possible, with a second frag now guaranteed to Arctic. Now the Converse aren't going to have really anyone here, and if they do have someone here, it'll likely be in the same exact straits as everyone else, slowly with the Sheriffs, as an attempt to shroud step goes nowhere near, as Hot Dog down in sewer denies it, and everyone else falls just as quickly as they attempt the approach. Egg Rolls with a frenzy. What could you possibly do? And they'll try to tease out a play up through heaven. They maybe would just like to drop one or two weapons out of the hands of Cumberland's offense, but they won't get any in the process, as their doppelganger of Hot Dog tallies a third kill for them in this round, and not just themselves closer to an ultimate, just one pip away, and pretty valuable one if they can get that ult orb and find out where all the defenders are lying in wait to see which site should be the easiest to take.
Yeah, just looking for something here. I mean, already a great little follow-up there from Cumberland, looking to hold on to everything they've earned so far and just looking to really just nail down that lead. But I mean, there's not going to be much time for it because, well, we have a full rifle round. That's where we should see everything start to culminate together, everything start to line up, and even better yet, Arctic, so long as you get one more kill, a dimensional drift to come to play there for a retake if you're not the one getting shut off so early. So it just comes down to seeing if you can manage to get yourself a first blood or just anything else. But Cumberland find themselves the first kill, and after that, we're going to see whether or not Arctic's ready for anybody else lurking about or looking for something to squeeze itself together. And I think, honestly, with that first one, understandably so. Get the ultimate, get out, play for the retake now.
It's noise being made and pressure being applied here towards C. You do have two players active defending this if you're Converse, but we're actually losing out on that fight overall, as Hot Dog is able to dish out very good damage to your Omen on site. They'll also take a pretty lick in the process, but the team didn't have to worry about C. They're all ready to pounce on A. This is where that dimensional drift could be a danger. The Heaven player of Blitz able to find a nice frag towards John, giving Arctic the chance now play lower side Hell. Maybe wait for an audio cue, or maybe wait for their distraction from Blitz as they try to play in through outer hall, and Arctic gets spotted by the jump peak and the salvo and the paranoia combo. Easy pickings to deal with Arctic after that. No sightlines, no ability to hide, and that is a great devolution, it seems like, for Cumberland being able to usurp control now over to the back side without really having to peek that in a dangerous aspect. Doc taking a lick there from Kyoto, being finished off easily, and it's just Egg Rolls remaining, being just a couple seconds away from spotting Gerardo. Now knows where Kyoto is. They'll be stunned here, and Egg Rolls will just continue to stand here waiting for the regen shield to put them back up to 25 armor. That'll be very helpful as they wait for an audio cue, and Hot Dogs will take the swing to keep their, well, Tejo of Kyoto safe and guarded to give Cumberland their third round win in a row.
Yeah, just looking for some consistency here, and they've, I mean, found it at least in some regard. Having an Earth that's on hand now, and even in the Armageddon off the back, I mean, being on the attacking side is going to be a huge asset, and just bringing down that clock, but better yet, flushing players into the direction that you want, especially when you know you get a breach and the aftershock in hand. There's a lot of possibilities you can be dancing with, but it just comes down to whether or not you can find that spike plan. On an eco round, we've seen Converse put in really good effort and find a lot of good kills on these kinds of rounds, but we got to see what they can do when it matters. We need to start out early. Double tap already coming through, seeing if you can manage to get something. While you do find yourself, sure, possibly a shot, you don't find a kill. And in exchange, Cumberland has found themselves possibly a place to call home.
Grass will play lower side sewer. We'll have a chance for an engagement here where this begins Gerardo on the opposing end. Have to deal with Case, but Case goes down, and Crass is able to find a second one to that long peek there for John. His Doc gets a freebie through a wall, though, being traded. This is major dubs for Converse's defense to try to knock some weapons out of Cumberland's hands. If Egros could have been able to stay hidden for a little bit longer, allowing for Arctic to be able to go collect a weapon down through long and maybe bring over a second one as well. But the timing just isn't there, and now Arctic will have to play alone, giving away their position, but taking the quick TP back towards spawn. This could be the way that he distracts this Cumberland defense, but they've read into this perfectly. Hot Dog has the sightline from Link. Kyoto was watching from the opposing side, stepping in to see. And Cumberland just know everything that's being teed up here for Converse. They've done their VOD reviewing, have done the homework about how this agent selection typically primes themselves on defensive retakes, and it is just a fourth round now in a row for Cumberland.
They also know the damage was done in that case, so you can go ahead and just make sure to play for that trade wherever you can. But in a situation like this where the round is starting once more, you're just kind of in that sake where we're seeing over and over and over again where these teams are just trying to manage something. And honestly, Arctic wasn't even in a position to even go for that take, if you ask me. I mean, 5 HP in a dream. You look at the cross and the call-out's been made that the guy's one tap. You can slam through walls if you have to. Find whatever spray you can, or just even a right-click classic, and that's going to just go ahead and close that thing up. But Cumberland managing to go ahead and keep the lead that they were looking for. 4-1, driving things home. Already being one up in the series, 3 ultimates to their name, and better yet, I'd say a little more influential of ones compared to that Dimensional Drift in the Armageddon. They're looking like they got the leg up here.
Converse will try to stall it as much as possible here towards A. They've already had a bit of a trade for utility. Here comes that Teo drone for information and for quick use for the suppress on top. And there you go. You catch 2. That's a lot of information. You now know for a fact they won't have any controller smokes for a moment. They have the Yoru there, and you've easily been able to assume that Arctic would have had the ultimate by this point. They'll bait out that flash, clear it away. Case has covering fire from the player quickly swinging afterwards. Crass is able to knock 2 players' heads off their shoulders, and Doc may have a chance for a spray transfer for the second. And there it is after Gerardo takes the next swing. Cumberland's offensive approach is shut down by a 2-player front. Only a single frag in return for contention. And Arctic with the finale now puts Converse in their first round of instance the pistol, and in a much better position where you saw over on the first map, it took them, what, round 9, I think it was, as they got 8 in a row to conclude for Cumberland in the first half of Split. They only had to get through 4 rounds in a row this time, and they should start to hopefully stabilize themselves a bit more, because this was a much-needed round by a large margin, keeping 4 players still alive, which means rifles still in their hands.
1 enemy remaining.
Yeah, I mean, just outstanding here. Just got to really get things driven. And I mean, honestly, Cumberland, as I mentioned, having resources. But I mean, it hasn't been a trend much because we haven't seen it nearly as often as it usually so. But like, Ultimate's just kind of being held. And finally, we're seeing those finally being whipped out, at least in some regard, forcing some players out. But even then, still, it has taken a while. While it's not taking very long for these kills to start being dished out, the dust has settled very quickly. Already, so many players at Cumberland being knocked out just almost instantaneously, and it really just comes down to Hot Dog in this 1v3. And knowing that there's a singular player over towards the backside, you can't recover this spike at this point without going through every single player first. You can't find a trick play. You can't set things up any differently. You can maybe find the first with that double stack there now. You got to find a different setup. You're waiting for these bullets to be sprayed out. But even then, still, pushing is an insane decision. But Aussie, nonetheless, you play stupid games and win stupid prizes.
Yeah, sometimes you're left with the only decision to make, and it's a desperate one. See the push coming out here for Cumberland. Gerardo tried to make something out of a really bad initial start. This push here from Cage trying to work off that Armageddon to the back of sight. Your plat player of Arctic was not cleared at all. Gerardo is having to refrag 2 players that Blitz gets, and while they did get a really nice shot, second shot to Blitz, Doc was not dealt the plat as they tried to retake the position that Arctic was within, and Converse had already essentially locked down the back of C-site, which the Armageddon didn't do really much for Cumberland to try to strip those players from those apex positions. But this next round, it'll be a first blood once again for Converse. The operator shot, the big boomstick comes out from Arctic. Blitz, maybe a chance to strip one player in. Look at the aggression. They wanted the shorty out for Case, and now Crest gets 2 from Long. And Converse, I said they had to set the tempo. They needed to get themselves confidence. The round where they got 4 players still remaining with a round win 2 rounds prior has seemingly done just that with the successful last round, and then now possibly this one, and just as good a straight as the 1-2 rounds prior. Mr. Raider has nowhere left to go but into the sight lines, the 2 players holding Long, and Blitz will be the player to find the impact frag to conclude it and get 2 pips by the end of it to their ultimate once again.
Yeah, an understandable timeout now, seeing that, I mean, we're seeing the rest of these players go ahead and start really feeling at home. I mean, Converse able to go ahead and get these lineups. Arctic now with the operator in hand. We're seeing all these guys be in much more comfortable scenarios of where they're sitting. And even then, better yet, Crass. We have seen what feels like at least 4 first kills out of Crass so far in this game. And I mean, considering there's not very many rounds in there so far, knowing that A-Site and knowing this guy is very consistent in getting those and good at getting those first bloods or just one taps off rip, you need to start understanding that maybe we should be flexing a little more of the map. You're going for these C hits, you're going for these A hits, but we haven't seen very much emphasis on Garage. We haven't seen too much come out of sewers and then just overwhelming that triple stack where Crash usually sets himself up at. So Cumberland needs to put a bit more of an idea of what they're going to do to really start breaking into sight rather than just trying to get on it.
Big thing to keep in mind as well for Converse is they're going to know Crash has the ultimate, the Hunter's Fury. It's not been utilized yet. Same thing with the Dimensional Drift. So Cumberland will have troubles when it comes to retake, and they're gonna have to kind of choose the direct sites that they want to hit in terms to kind of, I guess, hinder as much of those retake ultimates as possible. Mentioned a lot, A-side is the most retake objective. I won't say all of that anymore. Lotus has some pretty easy ones to retake, but still statistically one of, if not the most retakeable objective for defending teams, and that just comes to the utility that's still brought for the agents on the map, as well as the really high dominance you get from Heaven and the lack of smokes being able to be re-brought back up after the push into the site. So Cumberland will not want to hit that site. They're going to want to hit elsewhere so they can try to stall out a couple more of these ultimates, or even just utility for that side. But Doc from up on box uses a shrouded step to get away. Gets great assistance from Crash, who's no longer on A site, leaving it just to the Cypher as they're rotating correctly the Sentinel and Initiator as you should. And it's panned out to a flawless result once again for Converse, with just Gerardo now remaining, and they're going to have to step into Doc line of sight with a shorty in hand, and it's a free headshot that close and personal. No double tap ISO for you, Gerardo. You will not survive that push, and it's flawless for Converse.
Yeah, just good lookings once more. I would just go ahead, shut things down. I mean, obviously not really the best buy when we looked at the likes of what Cumberland was bringing during that round, but the read was there. They understand that Converse, I mean, Cumberland has to go somewhere else. They have to start flexing the rest of this map. I mean, while this advice still stands true, it's an eco route. You can't really beat yourself too much off the result of it. I mean, things didn't go your way, sure. But, I mean, knowing that even then, you didn't have any players allocated over towards C on that point, actually towards C main to find that relative split that we typically see. So there's a lot of opportunity here, especially when you know that there are so many players usually allocated towards sewers there on that elbow. I mean, A short could be an avenue, but you know that guys are there every single time. And I think you need to take a little more time to start really overwhelming that, giving that space. And even if it doesn't work out, you hopefully could have found a kill to go for a rotate and maybe cue something on the defensive side to go ahead and put another player there.
They just locked down that B garage so effectively that Cumberland now gonna have to question whether or not where really the Sentinel is, and once they can guarantee it's on A, they can just avoid that C site. You're up above, trying to keep Heaven under control. You send one shot here with the Hunter's Fury down into hell, and yes, John gets tapped, but now Crass is placing a fire, and Blitz doesn't play in for the assistance of the crossfire at all. but can use the double tap afterwards to try to swing out through Hall. The timing of it just plays a little bit more in their favor. Here's the dimensional drift, something Cumberland were really wary of from the start, when they were very aware of the fact there's such an easy retake potential. Oh, because Arctic's in the space of things, taking a hipfire shot to one. Egg rolls with the finisher, and Converse, 3 players left standing as the defuse will easily go through with tons of time still remaining in that back pocket. Cumberland were just victimized by that speedy approach from Converse. They would have had to buy another 14 seconds of success before they even had a chance to keep that Converse team from attempting the defuse.
Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, just huge there. I mean, great trades, but I mean, even then still, Converse is showing, I mean, the kills are much more comfortable to acquire here. And I think that's going to be a big asset for them going forwards. But even then, better yet, I mean, Doc now being on the field, Crass finding those first bloods, as I mentioned earlier. I mean, it's just outstanding what everybody's bringing, because even though it still doesn't just show across the board, it still, the relative closeness of everyone and the different ways they're finding those kills is the testament to what they're doing so far. As I mentioned, the first bloods, the operator now in play, even then Doc kind of finding those kind of nitty gritty kills that are on site during those retakes when all the dust kicks up. Everybody's found their kind of special spot and their little specialization when it comes around to these scuffles, and they are making sure to kind of play into those strengths. They're making sure just lean that thing down, because if something happens and something crumbles first, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but we got to see whether or not, when they actually have a site to look at as a full 5, which could happen in this round, how they're going to go ahead and approach that situation. Probably a little more lackadaisically than usual, knowing that this is an eco round for Cumberland. I mean, not that we haven't seen them win these kinds of things before, but still already queuing in the rotation and finding 2 off the back of that. They understand that, okay, obviously it's not C. We're allocated towards B, and we can just be there as soon as the fight goes down. And there you go. All 4 players turning, vision cones now headed east, and so are the bodies.
Crass will try to join in alongside, probably a double drop here towards Hell. The recon bolt to force the player back into the smoke is an attempted paranoia back up to heaven will stall it, but no chance for that. Gerardo with the operator that was collected gets themselves one big one, as Blitz now has a 1v1 to contend with. Kyoto can just hold that. There's the Armageddon. You can only buy a little bit of time, ensuring that they're not playing through short as it gets a little bit past you. But you'll have to careen quickly back over to this objective, and it should be an easy opportunity for Kyoto, now able to send a salvo, but Blitz just forced to play to the strengths of Kyoto's
he's pushing, yep.
Beautiful for Cumberland to secure this round, and while they'll all die to Spike here at the end for the detonation, it's still a victory that was eluding you for the past 5, and something that can hopefully set up for a tied 6-6 half. At worst, it'll be 7-5, and that is a much easier scoreline than it could have been if Converse was able to close with the last 2 in a row.
Yeah, and even then, I mean, Converse, keep in mind, it's going to be the half to where you usually wouldn't kind of say their strength is, because looking at them and looking at their composition, you'd say double duelists. They're going to be looking to get more aggressive. They want to be more attack-oriented, but still having themselves at least a guaranteed even by the end of this. It's just outstanding efforts. It's just a true testament to what they've done so far. I mean, as I mentioned, Crass with first kills. I think even then, that's a huge statistic to be looking at to really give a testament to what they have done on this half, because this guy has been relatively carrying it. Probably hasn't been super inside these scuffles. But speaking to those, he's already found himself one as well as Arctic. So being in a 4v3 scenario, Rolling Thunder going out, and Spike still waiting to go down, this is just great for them. They're saying, yeah, go ahead, panic. That's your space, buddy, but yet you still don't want it. Instead, they want to push and still find the exchange, saying that since Cumberland was a number up for a second, now they're not. Equilibrium, and Converse had to lead there for a while. We'll see what exactly is cooking up, because the 2 defenders that have been taking ages to get back onto site, they're coming right back through main, and with a neural theft in hand, this may be a pretty good time to just look for a body, throw that thing out, see where you can maybe find those easy kills.
The only ones that were so far, and you could see that Cumberland were trying to fight to contest any of their dead bodies on site. Arctic chance more for getting some damage off, but they know they have the advantage at that range, and it's just a matter of getting some shots downfield, downrange, and unfortunately, the ultimates don't really matter much if you can't use them. And the weapons just needed a single bullet, really, for either of those 2 players to finish the job. But the panic had set in, and there is just no real chance to survive that push. 6-6, our final halftime score. A much better position than the 10-2 we had previously with Cumberland on split at the end of first half. And while this ending result did turn to be a lot more in Converse's favor towards the end, still ultimately fell to Cumberland. Maybe the attack for Converse will change things up, as they have to play to Well, a pretty good selection, I think, overall for Cumberland's defense, still having that Sentinel choice, not having to worry about a double duelist, having the Tejo. It would be pretty difficult to deal with the stall potential that's there for a Tejo that Converse have to contend with to either of these two sites, though this round seemingly as they stack up heavily towards A.
Yeah, just looking for something here. And in a pistol round, well, it really just comes down to how much space you give yourself, or better yet, how much aggression you warrant in your own head. I mean, when we see these players really running into too much, do we see a great hold? Do we see Hot Dog just go ahead and press the W key and say, why not go for the full commit? We don't see any of that. Instead, it's your two duelists now waking up, able to go ahead and just do exactly what they are played to do. And, well, just going ahead and getting in there. So able to get that spike down. Egg rolls, having a great audible there to work off of. Understand that this is now the time I can make that poke and go ahead and get out and maybe find a free kill at the back of it. Doubling down the lead in terms of the kills that you have. But it seems like Cumberland is very quick to cut that number down. It is now in a 2v2 situation. And I don't believe, there is no utility available, but still egg rolls being that wild card somewhere, making those heads turns is just enough for Blitz to go ahead and close out the round.
Yeah, and you know that it's going to be a Sentinel on site. What's a great counter to that? Not letting the Sentinel use any of their utility, which means they have to play a very direct fight. Your ISO and your Omen have the perfect wombo combo for that. Use the undercut, which now also suppresses alongside, which means the spy cam is completely useless for the Cypher. On top of that, if they already had a cage up and running, it doesn't matter. Send a Paranoia, they can't fight back, and it's an easy kill. Converse played in a 3-2 front, a distractionary push onto A, baiting out a ton of utility that's already not very present in a pistol round, forcing Cumberland to go guns up the remainder of it and just win out where they should in a fairly solid post-plant position. If they continue to use this successfully, it's going to force Cumberland to rotate that Cypher a lot more than they would really like, but very similar to how Converse had to do that, rotating away their Cypher choice there of egg rolls alongside the Sova to try to keep those positions a little bit more static. As well, egg rolls does get a frag, but this one goes punished, I should say, as you'd have Kyoto working from attack respawn, getting one more. Arctic with the Bulldog off to the head of Case, and Kyoto having a double confrontation here. Maybe not sure that Craft is looking to contend, but Doc loses their fight, and now you know the only player left is John in Garage and Hall, and that's where you have your plat player of Arctic to finish off the job.
Yep, just good looks here. Converse doing what they're supposed to, able to open up this half. We haven't seen a round that's gone by that hasn't had that 1-1 exchange so far, and this is where I was expecting for that trend to possibly be broke, and there it is. Go and finally win out those first two, hold on to all the guns in the process, 2 Bulldogs, a Vandal, a Guardian. That makes this round 3 look just as doable, if not more, considering that, I mean, knowing that Guardian, the damage it was done, even if we saw an Outlaw possibly, that looking at those 2 Phantoms, or those 2 players, better yet, with half armors in hand, that's just easy free kills. I mean, that's one shot to the body, which I'm actually surprised that we're not seeing more Outlaws being bought with how powerful that thing can be, especially when you're going for kind of a C lineup, but it's not going to be too stressful when you look at the actually pushing onto site. You've already done plenty of damage, had plenty of opportunity, and better yet, if you get that spike down, you could have a round. Arctic's managed to get an upgrade in the process, or even then, isn't even worried about the upgrade. Just find 2 kills barking with the Bulldogs, and here we are. The 5v3 scenario, Cumberland with better guns in hand, but not nearly as good of a man-to-man situation.
Shots out from Blitz. The Bulldog comes through again, and it is teething to find the competition of Cumberland. This retake is going to feel nearly impossible. Great stuff from Kyoto to try to isolate the player behind Radiant Great, but no chance for more as Doc gets the swing. And they will only find a single kill if you're Cumberland for this 3rd round of the second half, which Converse had failed to find the second one every single time we saw it, Dallas. Now they've gotten 3 in a row, breaking the mold in a different fashion, so to say. And this time puts Cumberland in a chance where we can get to double digits first, Converse, and we can turn this back on its head. How do you recover on an eco round? The likely option is going to be to stack one side super heavily. They'll stay away from A, where they can at least get a solid retake for the most part. Maybe anticipate that Converse will go for a very swift push, just career into side as much as possible. But it's slow and steady for Converse's push, trying to stall out some utility still from Cumberland, whatever they may have, and hope to poke and prod to see what they're bringing, because you never know. Could be a Stinger, could be a Spectre. They just don't know it's all Sheriffs just yet. They're going to wait to get some information first.
Even then, I mean, I wouldn't blame him for going for the seaside on this approach. Knowing that even then, I mean, no matter what it may be, whether it be Stingers, whether it be Sheriffs, whether it be Spectres, no matter what it could possibly be, you know it's not an operator. You know it's not an outlaw. Focusing. You know it's not another one of the 2 main rifles. So you want to play a little more close quarters. You want to get into their face and even then force the right shot to the sheriff. And even then, it's a gamble you're willing to take, and it's one that Gerardo wins, at least on the defensive side for that first kill. But what about the rest of the team? Well, they're already out of there. They didn't like the look of it. So they're going to possibly try to hit B, spread their kills amongst the map, and just see whether or not they can make themselves on a bit of a world tour, but finally possibly closing out on A. Because with Arctic Pop and that dimensional drift, you should be committing off the back of it, even though there's 38 seconds.
Five pings go out. Kyoto still
A.
gets one before going down. This is something that Converse will look at if they lose this round. It's kind of the unfortunate nail in the coffin that should have been going the other way. Case though, Marshall out. Maybe hoping for an audio cue. Egg rolls makes a lot of noise. You can hear that drop there towards sewers. Maybe trying to trick out some intel. Case is way out in the open. Arctic will stand still for nary a moment, but eventually just relocate back out. Can some damage the other way. Arctic down through a lower ramp. Gets one more, and it's just Gerardo. They see the pit fly past them, maybe wanting to trick the TP in. They'll tap the spike for a moment. If they TP, it was a fake, not going to matter. Turns the lines of sights, and Ekrolls has a free frag onto Gerardo. Converse now at double digits. We call this the checkpoint or chokehold. And Cumberland aren't too far behind, but they already feel wary enough of the result for these first 4 rounds to call a timeout. I do see maybe the reasoning for this. They've seen a pretty good ideation of how they like to hit the C site for round 2 and 3. They also saw that they do put some pressure towards B, but they completely avoided the option of planting there and instead taking the long rotate around to attack or spawn to A. This could give them the idea that they can maybe more so vacate B in particular as choices to maybe just play for retakes there in primary positions, or just try to hold a single one there for a rotate frag and just have the option in case the Cypher, whoever it is that Converse decide to put into, to have, you know, stop down that player that's going for those positions like we see all the time now in competitive play for Collegiate.
Yeah, I mean, just so much here to work with for Cumberland's side in terms of, you know, the players they're working and the kind of shots that they're hitting. But even then, I mean, on this map, it just has not really been nearly as present. We haven't seen the same setup. We haven't seen even in then just kind of economic stabilization to possibly get an operator into just hands and line up over towards B, towards A, and shut down one of those sites like we would traditionally see to make their life easier and put them right back into that 50-50 that you want. But I mean, beyond that, Converse just showing up here looking good. I mean, I think overall, even whether they win or lose this series, it depends on how map number 3 would go. Because looking at the comeback and seeing the strings around and the just resilience of this team in map number 1, and seeing them still manage to kind of sustain somewhat of a lead, even though it's not significant by any means, shows that, I mean, they are here. They are competitors. But they got to close this thing out, and they got one more to run it afterwards.
Case will be the player that's left there for Converse. Or sorry, for Cumberland. I mentioned that they wanted to avoid majority having players there on B. Kyoto is peeking for information. I think they spotted Arctic, so they'll take a couple steps back, as well as likely having some audio cue, or maybe that was the pixel they saw was the drone coming around the corner. This is the luxury that Converse have, having the Sova of Krast instead of, you know, working with the Tejo. The drone is still fairly strong. The team is just prowling about, hoping for a first blood. Double tap makes a lot of noise here. Ultimate is also available for them. Could be a great way to pull a player away, and there it is being used. And even if they didn't have double tap up, it would still use it for them with the patch notes fixing that bug. But they don't even get the kill, which means they can't reset up the double tap. And it puts Converse now at a player disadvantage towards sight until the players can start to get these kills more freely. Doc from above, though. Now one more. Does Cumberland have the 2 trying to whittle their way through Hall? No Heaven approach available for them. They don't trust waiting out the chances the Omen smokes to continue to dissipate, and they have no counter smokes to their roster. Kyoto will pick this corner hard, and while they maybe could have seen an opportunity for a refrag, you don't win your 1 against Duck, and it leads to 2 players on short, finding easy opportunities to swing thereafter. 11 for Converse Gold, and little to no money for Cumberland. This is the decision, Dallas. How much do you choose to buy here? Because if you lose it, they're on match point, and even if you win it, how hard of a difficult round is it for you? And they'll still be able to buy no matter what, putting you in a gamble of, we're good, we won, but still not enough for the full team if we lose 4, or even if we lose 3, to go back into the next.
Try not to die.
I mean, with the 3 ultimates and with somewhat of a buy on here in hand, I mean, I gotta say I like this decision. It just comes down to really the weapon allocation, who you're choosing. John hasn't been nearly as much of a highlight player as what we saw during map number 1, and still having that player with the Vandal in hand when you look at everybody else. I mean, it's just a weird predicament to be looking at. You don't want to be losing too much too early, and knowing that Cumberland's going to be pushing up now, I do like at least this decision, and even then Converse already have a bit of a read off of it, knowing that there's going to be some aggression coming through, but we haven't seen actual plays coming out of that, because as I mentioned, that ultimate that is available, the Armageddon specifically, I mean, the From the Shadows good for rotation, Feral Theft good for information, but I mean, in terms of good for kills, Case isn't there for it, neither is John. I mean, there's 2 of your big guns in hand that you invested. I mean, the Stinger being one of them, the Vandal being the other. It just comes down to one last gun here between these last 2, because nobody on Cumberland cut down a Converse player.
Oh, and Blitz has the flank. Just thought, no, they had an idea, but doesn't matter if you have any inclination, if the shots just connect before the opportunity arises for the refrag back. Match point now for Converse. Very possible a 13-6 ending result. But Converse have really thrown this up on its head. If you look at the bottom left, you'd assume this was correct. You'd assume Converse map pick was in fact Haven, but apparently it's the reverse. It was the other way. Converse wanted split. We saw maybe the reasoning for that in the second half, but things went so wrong in the first because Arctic wasn't able to bring up to their prime that the result turned more to Cumberland's side. Arctic, though, has had no problems carrying on the second half performance of Split throughout the entirety of this game here on Haven. 24-9 as a Yoru with a team that doesn't really have a speed duelist, taking major advantage of the change here for the undercut for ISO and getting so many early frags that it punishes the Cumberland passivity, putting them in a spot where they just can't contend safely. They do get the upper hand in this round, though, as John's gotten themselves another headshot to crash the Guardian, finding good kills, and Dakuo fires blindly through the smoke at the traces Gerardo was sending their way. Now no controllers for Cumberland. A tailwind, maybe you could argue Cloudburst for your jet, but they have a Blade Storm out. They're trying to use this as the end-all be-all, and Spike has the freedom to kind of wait things out. Maybe hope for an isolated frag of this Tejo wrapping through spawn if you're Cumberland. Converse are not out of the chance for a 13-6 just yet, Dallas.
Most definitely not. 2 players alive, pretty good guns in hand, but issue is when you're trying to go for tricky plays, you gotta, better yet, know you have the read on your opponent to know that those are typically going to work, and already giving that information away, letting you know that there is somebody towards the back of the map. Better yet, there was at least 2. You get that vision there during that kill, but beyond that, yeah, I mean, understandably so. We see Doug trying to go ahead and squeeze something out and be a little bit tricky with it, maybe find a singular player before going over to site. But I mean, when you got 3 players in the back just waiting for something to happen, you're seeing more so what's going to be after it. Almost a lineup there for a singular couple frames, but beyond that point, nothing more. Good for Cumberland to keep this game rolling. They got now 7. They got plenty of time ahead of them, but they got to make sure to create that time, and that's not very easy to do.
7th round for Cumberland. Is this the beginning of more to come, or is this a stance that Converse will not take lightly? They found 6 in a row for this attacking position. There's been little to no defensive success, because even in the rounds that Converse were winning, a lot of the times they'd have 3 to 4 players left standing, or even flawlesses. How much can change throughout the remainder of the half? Any mistakes will be capitalized upon by Converse, especially as they start to tally the ultimates. We mentioned 3 were available for Cumberland going into that round, and there were none on the reversal for Converse, and now they have some. Counter ultimates that could work well from the shadows to try to stall out for another side, try to let the team rotate and have the flank, have a sandwich for a pincer. Or even further, dimensional drift to clear out the players towards Platas. Look at the way Cumberland are stepping back into this site. Arctic doesn't know where they need to extend from, but Doc at least creates some leeway as Arctic wants some more. Stepping out, but just can't get out of space. Wanted into the garage hallway, but just didn't have the stance to do so thanks to the body blocking coming out from the breach on Cumberland. Blitz doesn't know how close it could have been, as Converse now are here on the A site of Plant. Your Cypher nowhere near, maybe wanting to try to play this exit frag for the rotate through B, but they'll have to clear a tripwire in the process, and Kras needs to choose to engage early or play for the fallback, as they'll have a chance for Kyoto, and now they can play even further back, waiting for this Cypher. The expectations there for Cumberland. They just don't know where the Cypher is. They don't know they're already too late. And Kras can get a free pip off here to Case. Maybe a chance to get a second swing afterwards, but wow, what a wall bang! And Egg Roll's now alone. Peeking can shut out. No, can't get the headshots. And Cumberland will get the defuse. Converse will have to play yet another game, another round of Valorant, as Cumberland do not want to let this go without overtime.
Yeah, just insane here coming out from Cumberland once again, winning another round just by a very good fashion, managing to keep a lot of their players alive in the process. But I mean, it doesn't seem to be being Converse up too much because of just how much padding is in their economy leading into these couple losses. They're not tweaking about it, not the end of the world. You have 3 ultimates to play with. I wouldn't be surprised if they want to go for the C site soon as a desperate attempt, knowing you do have the Hunter's Fury in place, unless you can kind of keep Egg Rolls alive, give that information to make sure that the guy doesn't get flanked from behind as it's going off. But everything beyond that, you got to look at everything else available. From the shadows, create that pressure. The Armageddon could flood you out. I mean, you just got to make sure to see if you can bait any of these things ahead of time. And just having a round that looks good is going to be enough to do that. Or just a first kill.
An interesting decision, but it's panning out for Cumberland. It forces Blitz away from the corner, and the double tap can only save them from 1 bullet, but the 2 bullets, the 3 players, I should say, that are firing back make that an easy kill. Gerardo now takes down the doppelganger of Doc, and you're left with only 2 for Converse. And Krast has been a big facilitator for success for Converse, but this may be too hefty of an ask for them. No real Cypher utility to speak of on B site. Krast can see where the smoke is originating from, but just doesn't have the ability to take the shot to Gerardo in time, as Egg Rolls all alone gets away with 1. But they do not have the lap of luxury for more. It is a 12-9 scoreline as Cumberland are 3 away from etching overtime and maybe taking it in OT to secure a 2-0 victory, though that is a big ask and a wise timeout for Converse to say, okay, 2 in a row, shame on us. Let's not let this go too further. We must see Fracture to continue here for the SEL.
Yeah, I mean, even then, out of Cumberland, though, knowing that even then, making sure to manage that, at least in whatever form possible. I mean, the Armageddon was something crazy. That was just something. But, even then, it worked out in some regard. He found something off the back of it. But, that's good on them for at least knowing that they should be investing things here. They should at least span those out over the course of rounds whenever it matters, rather than just saying, oh, Rolling Thunder, and then we'll just use, the Aftershock on that wall. No matter what, you're going to possibly find that hit. But it makes sense to go ahead and use it in a way where you're saying, okay, we can more than likely get a kill off of this. But Converse, as I mentioned earlier, they haven't really been finding too much in terms of the ultimate utility. They haven't really been using much of it at all, because even then, better yet, look at specifically out of the one that you could get over towards, as I mentioned earlier, Seaside. We see a lot of teams now just kind of whipping that thing out immediately. Krast, obviously, with the first kills, knowing this guy and knowing his luck of what he had on defense, at least you could go ahead and just throw that thing out blind, while we usually question it. More times than not, this season specifically, we have seen it at least manage to get something, whether that be a hit or whether that be a kill, or even then more so, as long as you got the right lineup, you could find yourself just in space to get that spike down without much contention.
Ooh, look, Cumberland wanted to take an early fight there towards C Long, but no one there for Converse. They wanted to maybe fight for the ult orb, I'd assume. Maybe that's what they're going for, but they sent the Paranoia just to the inside of main. Not really worried too much about lobby itself. They had 2 players prowling there. Case does fall back, though. Reasoning up to the decision, and Cumberland don't really get much impact off of this, as Converse will continue to stay static here towards attacker spawn. They've tanked up and moved their Cypher into a position just outside of B towards Rabbit. While there is a tripwire there, that's something that is easily spotted. They just don't want to clear this to give away full information and intel off to the side. No matter how many shots it goes to, it's enough to kind of ward this Cumberland roster, as they use the Owl Drone closer towards A Long, and then once again put another player in a prime position, have a rotate or a very late flank in towards a position, which has now drawn all of the lines of sight and players for Cumberland over towards A. From the shadows, do they stick it? No, they'll fall further back, and the team now has full safety to see, though they don't know this, Dallas. And any hesitancy here will allow for a rotate back for Cumberland, and knowing they have a Rolling Thunder, knowing they have a Neural Theft, a single kill could be enough for free information. But they have to be worried about this flank, as the Omen of Doc has a chance for more, and even the Cypher to clear out that tripwire could have a play in through that link, as there's the Rolling Thunder. Spike cannot be contested. 15 seconds ticking, time is running out, so they know the player's in the corner. Krast gets away with 1, needs more though, but Spike goes down, and the chances have now drawn to 0 for Converse Gold to find a victory in the round, and they'll have to play for it back, as time ultimately became the biggest problem for Converse, despite the fact the Rolling Thunder came in.
Yeah, I mean, well played. As I mentioned, still spacing these things out, understanding that, I mean, there is going to be time, there's going to be a place, there's going to be a situation to do things, and even more so, when you use that Rolling Thunder, you got the Neural Theft next, find yourself a singular kill, hopefully a first blood, get your Cypher to immediately rotate and scan the positions of everybody else. Or just stand there, wait for everybody else to get on site, and then you get that free information as you're making that retake underway. I mean, there's so many possibilities here for Cumberland to make this look even more so doable. With Converse, once again, the From the Shadows being rested during that last round, but everything else still just being a complete toss-up, where you're just waiting for ISO, where you're just waiting for Yoru to get those to play with. Meanwhile, Cumberland, they're already playing with them, and they're using them in a pretty good regard where it feels tempo, because, I mean, Tejo's is basically already halfway back. Meanwhile, Cumberland, they're managing to get rounds, and they only need 2 more rounds to get that comeback. Converse, opening things up with a kill out of Blitz. That's big, but not big enough because Case finds the trades. Not the first blood that I talked about earlier. That could have been one-sided, but there is still some chances here.
This is actually a really solid spot for Converse being now. They've charged the ult from the ISO, which means next round for Contagion to see. It opens up a lot of opportunities. They'll only have one more chance, but they get the job done here. May not matter, but Gerado's taking so many players to the afterlife, and there it is. 3 for Gerado. Case closing out that final. Enough distraction shots from Hot Egg down all the way through C-Long. And Converse Gold have now given up 5 in a row in return, and Cumberland are etching just so close to an OT scenario where, Dallas, you and I are not foreign to the concept of OT on split, but Haven, it's a little bit harder pressed to see, especially when the scoreline looks so difficult for Cumberland to the second half defensively.
Yeah, I mean, used to once you get there, I mean, especially when you're in that scenario, but I mean, to even get there in the first place, especially the fashion that you do it, not seeing it as a comeback better yet, because that's what it's felt like. It's been nothing but tonight. Over and over again, rather than keeping rounds close, back and forth, back and forth. We've seen such big strings of rounds over and over and over again between these two teams that we haven't actually seen anybody stabilize, or even then better yet, just good, gritty gameplay between the two, just keeping it rolling. But no matter what, you can still say the scoreline's good, because as I mentioned, I just wanted to see these teams have things flushed out. I wanted to see just a score line that was back and forth, 1 for 1, just exchanging blows until somebody gets the finish and says, this is the point, we got to really squeeze it out and just finish things off. But this isn't one of those situations. Seeing strings of rounds shows more so of a team's collapse than anything else, or better yet, just a testament to how one team is playing. But we don't get the best of both worlds. We don't get the best of both teams here in a manner like this. We've seen, as you can tell right there, 6 in a row, then 5 in a row. I mean, it's that point where we're seeing that, okay, where did it go? What happened? What adjustments were made? We're not seeing a night and day difference of how they're approaching and really playing this game. It's just more so that Converse hasn't been able to find nearly as many kills as they were earlier.
Now you have this round I mentioned. You have the ISO ult, and you'd like to use it. And they'll send this off, and no one's connected to it. Would have been so much more viable for Garage to see, or see itself, to try to clear out a player in the back of Radiant stack. You had a perfect combo previously with the undercut and the paranoia. But Cumberland wisened to that, so if you sent it closer to defender spawn, you'd clear out that player. Now knowing the ult's not in the economy for Converse, Cumberland can play a whole lot more up front, and they're willing to do so. Trying to contest Blitz here to lower side short on A. They don't have any full intel, but the Cypher cam is doomed to eventually find something. There is an Omen in the back of sight. Paranoias, you got a pre-fire, don't know where they move to, but you'll still have Arctic, who TPs to the Radiant stack to deal with Gerado, who goes to Plat. TP on TP. Converse come out victor. Case gets that refrag and keeps this to an even 4-on-4 as Case wants to move forward. Paranoia, not a good spot to be within.
Have some kind of util here.
Double trade in the process. John for 2, and now even more as the Hunter's Fury from all the way down C-Long. This could have been saved, but they just didn't feel safe enough to do so. Blitz on the flank gets 1. John, though, is 3, and John saves Cumberland on map 2, sending them to overtime with a 4K to net them 14 and 17. It's OT, baby, for the SCL in our game here to start off the LCQ.
So close. I mean, even then, I mentioned Cumberland, and that was as close as it could have gotten, but I would have liked to have seen it, as I mentioned earlier. Get it out earlier. You know the setup. It's so default. It's so easy, and I understand. I mean, honestly, this was arguably, in terms of positioning, the best time to get it off because you have Blitz over there on that flank looking to go ahead and kind of carry things out, but it just wasn't, the timing wasn't there. You're hoping to get a tap off. You're hoping that things are kind of already clustered and chaotic on top of that site, but everything else culminating to do it, it was roughly still waters besides that 100's Fury. It's rogue, it's kind of going places, and it doesn't have too much of a basis off the back of it. The time you want to do that is at the start of the round when you're saying they're probably in spawn, but that thing extends across the entirety of the map, and it's not going to matter at that point. So 12-12, OT, overtime. Cumberland start off on the attacking side. Let's see what's done here.
Case was in at a cloud burst to make sure nobody can have a crossfire from the play in, and just trying to give a bit of an audio coup to two players down through sewer. It's the double layer
Spike
push
down
though.
A.
And you do get a 1-for-1 trade, which is fairly substantial. But overall for value, I would argue that Cumberland get the worst end of that in terms of utility. Converse are trying to prowl around this map control. Haven's one of the few maps where fighting for map control could be so efficient for teams, for players. Converse want to utilize this as they're on the defense now. No frag there. They get some damage to Gerardo. Nothing more. But you'll see them ready to push through to B. Whether this is a way for them to rotate through Link to C, or an actual attempt to plan on a site that is very unfavored by most rosters, may not matter. Tailwind up to upper side. A cloud burst to cut off the sideline to Link. Doc has also been completely suppressed here by the dark cover being laid in by Gerardo. Spike will go for B, and this is something fairly shocking, but Case getting this frag from up above gives them the player advantage they're looking for, and Hot Dog makes it even more substantial, but Krast and Doc tally in. Krasp on the other side of Link. Doc needs to find one more. They know that Case is still here, and Doc gets it through the wall, leaving just Kyoto. And the salvo has been recharged, can buy time, and Converse have to be aware of this. They'll send both players to the inside layer to Link. Wary that maybe Kyoto is playing on that side in through garage. May not matter. There's the salvo layer, and Kyoto can continue to buy this time as Doc has to make a choice. Dark cover. There's the D-stave. Not gonna matter. Touching close. Force Kyoto in. It's a shorty on shorty. You have to tap further, and Doc knows there's just no way. Converse fall victim to the stalling nature of Atejo and give Cumberland the first round in OT.
Yeah, so well played there. Just going ahead, understandably so, going to wait till that last second of this fight. Doesn't even really worry him too much about the halfway point. Understands that you're just waiting till the end there, and then that shorty shot lets you know he's not on it. This is good. Let's keep it rolling. Go to the next one with the round up. And I mean, just great reads. I mean, even then, better yet, getting that first blood. You saw the likes of Converse in the back of B side, just stressed. Is it C-Link? Is it A-Link? Where's this guy coming from? There has to be a wraparound to some extent. We don't really know where. And even then, I was thinking as you're commentating, I was like, he just needs one. All that utility in that back pocket, he just needs one. And that's going to be more than enough to stall out a singular player in a 1v1 kind of situation. There it was. And now back on the defense, we see Cumberland. This is where they struggled for the longest time, but they found the comeback. They managed to get there. We got to see them do it in a one-off kind of situation here.
Doc will try to be the first person for impact, as there is a jet that's fairly aggressive spot. Obviously would be able to tailwind out if they didn't do so in the first place to get there. Converse do not want to fall into the problem that they ran into at the end of the first half, or second half, sorry, where they weren't getting these first bloods, they weren't finding impact frags, and were going punished as they approached into sight. The double tap has already been played in, and they'll try to use an undercut to extend in towards garage. Nobody is pressuring this whatsoever, but they do burn a little bit of breach util in the process, which can be a solid way to try to set up a maybe next stage push. Cumberland come out on top, 2 frags. Paranoia does connect to Kyoto. They knew where they were, but you don't have the ISO from the undercut. You don't have a second person to go in, and a single smoke that's sent out by Cumberland puts Doc in a spot where they have to engage forcefully, and this is an easy smoke to swing around, and just they don't connect the headshots. Timing is all wrong. Shots just aren't connecting. Krast is alone, and Kyoto almost single-handedly, like John, in their 12th round win. They net Cumberland a map 2 victory. No, Case steals the limelight, but it's done and dusted. Converse tried so darn hard here, Dallas, but Cumberland's higher seed eventually gets them to a higher elevation. They'll move on here in the LCQ.
Yeah, good on for them, just for getting the job done. But even then, I mean, still, obviously like to go play devil's advocate when it comes around these kind of situations. I mean, you got to humble these teams. You got to let them know that, I mean, it wasn't a perfect win at the end of the day. Cumberland had a long and tumultuous road to get to this point. I mean, considering that they started out this entire series with a bang, being at 10-1, and you're saying, okay, this is this is going to be chalked, right? This entire thing could just be under wraps here. I'm checking my watch and I'm at the point of, okay, probably 20 more minutes. We got 2 maps just done and dusted behind us. But I mean, it's at that point where, I mean, you're allowing so many strings of rounds to happen over and over and over again that you just can't let that happen in these kinds of situations. But even then, it seemed to just be consistent, no matter who qualified, honestly, no matter who won. Between both these teams, as I said earlier, it wasn't a matter of a close game where it was back and forth, back and forth. It wasn't a matter of huge adjustments. It was more so just kills shifting. Teams getting more first bloods, teams getting, I guess, maybe overzealous and extending out and then finding those deaths easily. And then once again, just trying to play from behind. But even then, still, during that second entire half, it just felt like both stringed kills rounds was more so just like 3-4 players surviving at the end of it. And you're saying, what is happening? And it just feels like they're toggling a switch rather than playing right there in the middle.
I say it a lot. I feel like teams that frag together typically win together. So it's very rare to see a team with the 2 top fraggers in the match lose out a map. 27-17 for Arctic, 23-15 for Doc. And while Kyoto also at 23, the next highest they was Dorado at 20, but your bottom 2 fraggers were 15-14 frags, which puts you 10 plus kills behind. The team wasn't super consistent together, and this stat just turns into a game where everyone was holding the middle ground successfully. They were holding their own well for Cumberland, and it leads them to just barely edging out the victor there on this map against the side of Converse. And when you compare first bloods, 10 alone for Arctic Dallas is an unreal stat line. 10 of your 27 kills were to start these rounds, to give you an impact kill, to open up the potential for the rest of the team in the push. And I felt like so many of those came off the first 6 rounds of the second half, as well as the good first start that they had in the first half on defense, where you were a little bit more haywire, a little bit more hectic, willing to push, building up some confidence. Arctic did everything for this team, and unfortunately, consistency wins out, and eventually you see Cumberland wisen up to how this Yoru was playing, and the moment that somebody wisens up to the Yoru play style, if the Yoru doesn't change, well, the scoreline's going to change, and it's going to change in the favor for Cumberland, and they let it to OT, and they swipe you through OT as quick as that.
Yeah, it was that point where, I mean, Cumberland, obviously, we had them a place a little bit higher in terms of the seeding. I mean, just their history in general, how they beat these other teams. I mean, it just looked like this was going to be any different, but more so, I didn't expect it to be the close game that we wanted, but yet still the wash that we expected in some regards. Seeing this team historically, it just, as I mentioned, with those strings of rounds, they just got to be able to find a way to make those adjustments earlier, or even more so just understand what their faults are and are inside of the game. I mean, because I'm sure that's usually what the timeouts were for, rather than just figuring out what's going on. It's more so coach, like, dude, we need an outside perspective. Who is not really playing this right now? Like, no harm, no foul, no bad blood about it. But what exactly is going on here? Who's overstepping their lines? Who's putting themselves in situations that they shouldn't be? Who needs to be more conservative? And better yet, who just needs to keep doing what they're doing? Who's looking good right now? What does that mesh? What does that blend look like? What do we need a little less of? What do we need a little more of? Because this isn't shifting the goalpost. This isn't changing perspective and completely just alternating what kind of perspective or what kind of game playing you got. Is more just kind of tweaking the dials and the sliders a little bit to say, let's find something that's more comfortable that just closes this thing out.
Speaking of things being closed out, well, this game is done, and that does guarantee that we're seeing Cumberland face off against Oklahoma in the round 2 of LCQ. But we also have a lot of other games that have been guaranteed by this point. This game went on so long with a near OT recovery map 1, and then obviously a little bit of an OT in map 2. A lot of these games, as you kind of expect for an LCQ, where it's the high seed versus the low seed, ended in 2-0s. But there was a couple in there that were kind of crazy to look at here, Dallas. Number 1 came down to match 1 was UTC versus Bama. Bama was really trying hard. They were an underdog this semester. Unfortunately, couldn't pan it out. UTC moved on. They were the number 1 seed. They were considered for a while there for us one of the best teams in Tier 1, if not the best team in Tier 1 before, and having some struggles and difficulties being forced into the LCQ instead of Winter Circle. Knights Rising, though, takes a 2-0 loss against GMU, meaning that in match 9 of round 2, the first match of round 2, it'll be GMU against UTC to decide who gets to move forward. UKY obviously forfeited against Oklahoma. That's why we see Cumberland Destiny now face Oklahoma for match 10 in round 2. But Charlotte Esports takes down MSU as expected as the number TC versus 15. But Georgia Tech loses 0-2. And this is a team we considered as one of the best, if not the best team in Tier 2 as a whole. Maybe it's just a pool difference. Maybe it came down to maps. We'll have to take a look. But this does net that it will be a Charlotte Esports versus Charlotte Esports, or technically Niner Esports main team, as they face off in match 11 for round 2. So it's their main roster versus their main roster, as they describe themselves.
Right.
So that should be fairly entertaining. UGA Red take down LA Tech Blue. UJ Red was kind of this team a lot of people were questioning. They kind of squeaked through off some technicalities into tier 1. They kind of looked like they belonged there, but it was obvious that UJ Black was the better roster of the two. They had no problem dealing with LA Tech Blue, but LA Tech's also had, I would say, some substantial difficulties throughout this pool. Not looking as good as they have previously, but still being a very steady roster. But they get 2-0 in that capacity. And then we don't know the result yet for UAH versus UCF Knights. But the expected result should be UAH. But wow, imagine if we see UAH and Georgia Tech lose out here for LCQ. I would just be baffled here in Dallas. It'd be crazy. The LCQ is taking no prisoners. They're all being executed in their stead for this round 1.
I mean, I've always mentioned it, though, at least when it comes around to the Charlotte school and what they've done. I mean, even then I talk about Niners Esports main team not really being the main team, but still being the main team. Who really quite knows. But one thing I know for sure is, even then historically I've mentioned it, while this team has never really been that impressive when it comes around to the Swiss stage, with the exception of our inaugural season, it's beyond that. They've been bracket demons. They understand that, as I even mentioned last week as Swiss stage was coming to a close, that when you put teams into a bracket, that's when they say, all right, this is actually serious now. Like Swiss stage, we're guaranteed games week after week after week. We get to play no matter what. But it's at that point now we're saying, we don't get to play if we lose. So got to lock in, got to tighten up. And that's where you see these teams really just go ahead and say, we're completely different. As I mentioned, that switch, how I like to see teams kind of play it from the middle and just ride it out and see that consistency. This is when a lot of teams like to go ahead and turn it on.
Yeah, we also have guaranteed that there was a forfeit in the winner's circle because there's a game going on today. It was Cumberland Phoenix versus Texas State. So that's been unfortunately forfeited for Cumberland Phoenix, of all things, interestingly enough. But in the winner's circle, they're really just facing each other for seeding. So it's not like a really important thing for them to take victories. UJ Black has to play their game against JMU. That's a really good question. Darby was super confident that they would be able to come away with the victory against UGA Black. They thought they were a scary team, and they thought they'd be pretty good, but then they watched Cumberland Phoenix trounce them, and they said they weren't really scared of UGA Black anymore. So maybe something changes there. But I do know that we want to come March 20th. I know we want to, because I don't think we have any games next week, if I recollect correctly. Am I right on that, or am I incorrect? Because that's break next weekend, right? Yes.
I know spring break is coming.
Yes, that's next week. So no games next week. Well, we do have some really good games I'd love to see. Obviously, the Charlotte Esports versus Niners main team would be a big one. I think Cumberland versus Oklahoma would be pretty interesting. And then, UGA versus UAH, get those games on a thing, because we haven't seen either of them on stream just yet. There's a lot of good games here. GME versus UTC. Oof. A lot of really good games here. And I'm going to try to get as many of those as possible. Please reach out to us. I'll be reaching out to you next week to schedule these games to go off stream, because we really want to, and I think we've guaranteed it, we're going to get the winner's circle game of JMU versus Cumberland Phoenix, the two teams that are expected to be the best teams in the league facing off against each other. And that should be one of the best games you could possibly ask for, because we're not just seeing that in a winner's circle. There's a chance that comes back again in the final stage of the playoffs, and then again if they make it to land, which it's hard pressed to imagine neither of those teams making a land at this state with the way that they've been performing. But time will tell. May still fairly good distance away, 2 months away. There's still things that could change, things that could go wrong, and teams that could usurp thrones, because we've already seen enough crazy ones here today. But with that, that's all we have here for the SEL this week. There'll be more action, not next week, but the week after. We're trying to get some content pieces to everybody out there, some more interviews with players, maybe have them reschedule some things, talk with some things. We'll get it all out there as best as we can. But for us here for the SEL, thank you to our production booth. That is Shaku, who's our head of production. Thank you to Bolby once again for being our observer. My name is Infernos, joined here wonderfully by Mick, and we'll see you guys on March 20th for some more Valorant action.